Strategic back again. Yes, we got a really awesome show for you guys today. I appreciate you guys for joining me for yet another event. Spectacular. The Strategic Eyes Show, man. We could have a great time today. Yeah. All right, so we got a special guest with us today. Definitely looking forward. Always great to have him on the show. Great friend of the show, V Radio. What up, V?
V Radio back again.
Oh boy, we can't even see V Radio. Let's get him over here. My apologies. What's happening, V man? So before we even go any further, V, can you please tell us what the hell happened to your show, please? Because you didn't even tell me yet.
Well, it basically okay. So I got a minor attracted persons GoFundMe taken down because they were arrested in a sting operation.
What?
And I don't think that that's directly what did it, because what they did is they then went after me about my stream intro and claimed that there was hate speech in it. And I was like, that's a video from like a long time ago.
Really?
And then I use it at the beginning of all of my streams, which is one of the reasons I'm migrating to like other places, because if they
Right.
wanted to start, like racking up, and nailing me on all these videos that I've ever used those memes on, they'll
Right.
have that meme intro that I use,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, then they're gonna take my channel. Is what's gonna happen, end up happening if that's what they're gonna do. I don't know if they will, but
Do you
yeah,
think
so
you think it might have been allies of the
yeah, I'm fairly confident that that's probably what's happening.
right?
Um,
Damn.
so I mean, we'll see. I mean, one way or the other, it's not going to change anything for me. But in the meantime, we're actually live on my Odyssey channel and my Facebook. So we'll see how it goes. I like this setup. This is interesting because I was able to add all of my channels and join your channels. That was pretty sweet.
Yeah, man, Restream is awesome, man. I'll definitely know this is not a paid promotion, but I'll definitely give them their flowers. Restream is definitely a step up better than StreamYards, which is what I used before. And they give
Right.
you more without asking for more. With StreamYards, it's like, you want some extra feature? $50 extra.
Right.
Restream just gives it to you. You know, they do have their upper tiers, but everything that you're gonna need to do a YouTube channel on our level is right here. And to be honest with you, like even if I became like a 500,000 subscriber guy, I don't think I'd even need to upgrade to more than what we get right now. So I definitely would recommend it, brother.
Well, in order to do what we're doing right now on, like if I was gonna get, because I have like 4 channels on here, like I can't even do that on StreamYard right now. Like,
Right.
and then it's letting you add all of your channels too at the same time. This is insane.
It's
Like,
definitely content creator friendly because not only does it allow you to invite other people, but they allow folks like yourself, the guests, to actually share it on their platform. So everybody
right,
gets the love. You know who put me on with this? Actually, it was Matt of Opinion put me on with it.
hmm,
And he was using it for quite a while. I was just so dedicated to StreamYard for some strange reason. I'm a very loyal person at times. And
right.
yeah, I just had to break out of it, man. But we're happy to have you here, man. It's awesome. We have a really good show planned for all these folks who are going to be peeping in as the live continues. They'll be streaming in. And thanks for coming, man.
No problem.
Awesome. So the topic of today is quite simple. All right. I've been talking on the last few shows about how I'm going to vote for 2 Republican candidates in the New York State race. That's it. I'm not changing my party affiliations. I'm not becoming a Republican. I'm not voting for Republicans for federal offices. There are 2 Republicans in the state of New York that I've decided I believe will do a better job than the incumbents who are currently serving in those seats, right? And a lot of people are losing their ish, man. They're going crazy. They're losing their minds. They're pissed off with me. You know, I'm getting the, well, you don't know what you're talking about, to the, the racial stuff. You're black. What are you doing? Da, 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 da. All Republicans are arcists, and all these different things that we can't say the full names for on YouTube without getting spanked, right? That's what's
Right.
coming into my inbox. So I think what I wanted to do today, and I'm happy that you're joining me on this journey,
Hmm.
is I want to point out how the left is not addressing the needs of one of their core constituents. And one of their core constituents is the African American community. No other demographics votes for one party at the rates, numbers, and percentages as African Americans do for the Democratic Party.
Right.
You find more diversity in the Latino community, the Asian community, any other community you could possibly think about. But when it comes to the African American community, the majority of their votes, over 90%, goes to the Democratic Party. And for some reason, we refuse to see that this party is failing us. Now,
Right.
I'm not here to sell the African American community that the answer lies in the other party. Oh, go vote Republican because the Democratic Party is not failing you. What I'm here to do is actually open up that conversation and say, hey, maybe we need to talk about this. What do you think about this before we go any further, any videos or anything like that?
Honestly, you start to wonder when you study it really closely. You're beginning to wonder if
Mm.
somebody's literally trying to sabotage the progressive movement because
Mm.
we're losing. Like, this is not working. Like, this is like all of the motive. Like, okay, because Bernie Sanders really built like some serious momentum, and now that's
Right.
all at threat because of this nonsense. The funny thing
That's
is, if
true.
they ask him and they don't get too loud about it, but he's openly said, I don't support defunding the police. I think the police need more funding,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and they just don't say anything about it because that's their guy. They don't want to argue with him. But, the squad, which I'm honestly not looking forward to becoming the inheritors of the progressive movement, I might add.
Mm.
They're all about it. And I'm just like, it's a loser. And the other thing is that, like, as you pointed out, majority African Americans, well, what do Gallup polls say? Majority of African Americans want to retain police presence. That's what Gallup
Mm.
polls say.
Right.
Like I said forever ago, when you and I first did a show together, like my friend Rob, black gentleman who just kind of quietly sits at these rallies and protests and listens, and said that the two people who wanted to defund the police were either people that he knew were lifelong criminals or people who had no idea what they were talking about. They didn't know what was going on. That's why I watched your stream earlier. I was kind of hyped about this topic because, like, the AK Nation video that you were reviewing, it was
Mm.
just very astute. He's like, you're not living in the neighborhoods where this is happening. Like, you don't know what
Right.
you're talking about. And they don't. That other weird Hill video that we watched where Brianna Joy Gray and brings on that Twitter chick, and then, like, poor Robbie, it's
Yeah.
the libertarian guy's like, got this weird look on his face. Okay, but we're not gonna put the violent criminals back out on the street, right? And they're like,
Mhm.
they just did not have a good answer. And I just, that's when we get into this nonsense of crime as a construct. That's what we covered when you came on my show, is like this weird leftist concept. And I'm like, oh, okay, so it's a construct. So you don't mind if I come over to your house and steal your stuff because crime's just a construct, right? It just, I don't, it's strange to me because now it's so irrational. Like, there's nothing redeemable about this to anybody who's ever lived in those neighborhoods. And I do believe that there is a poverty connection. I think there's a symbiotic relationship, but they don't put any energy into motivating kids as activists to make their lives better, to do the things that are available to them. And as I think we've talked about this before, Brett Weinstein once brought on this huge panel of black intellectuals, and they made it.
Right.
They were like, "Well, what do we think about reparations?" And they're like, "Well, the problem is studies show that, like, people who win the lottery,
Mm.
tendency or again within 4 years, no matter what color they are, so you
Mhm.
throw money at them, like, because it'll be gone." So
Right.
we have to change the culture, and it's not even a racial thing. Like, I think I mentioned my sister is still there, and if you ever interacted with her, you'd never believe we were related. We don't talk the same. She's completely
Mm.
absorbed, into that world. So, but that's my thought. It almost, because it's so idiotic that you're like, what could they possibly be gaining from this aside from the fact that, for the same reason that I'm concerned as a 2008 activist when the Patriot Act was coming around, that it almost
Right.
felt like all of this violent activism was to try to encourage people to be more comfortable with the idea of draconian crackdowns on protesters. And that's exactly what's happening. Like, people, blocking freeways and stuff. That's just making people think, well, just go arrest them, go get them out
Right.
of here. But it's
It's a
also the
fact.
same thing. It's with this, it's going to be, well, now we're going to want draconian police measures if we get to just set these people free.
That's true. And when, going back to some of the things you said, when you ask these activists, like in reference to the conversation that Janky Uger had with this Brooklyn public defender attorney who basically said she wanted to abolish prisons. I think you saw that video. You might have put me
Yeah.
on with that video. Oh, well, somebody sent it to me on the Discord, so make sure that you jot the Discord. Basically, Cenk Uygur, who now has changed course and now he believes that we need not to defund the police and he believes that Democrats are too soft on crime. This is definitely diametrically opposite of what he was saying during the whole defund the police movement. But I guess it's happening in his back door, so now he has to change his mind about things, right? He
Right.
had on a Brooklyn district attorney, not district attorney, a Brooklyn public defender, right? So she's one of the people who defends the perpetrators, which is important. I always say I have none but respect for public defenders because they are in the Constitution. We need to be able to get a honest and intellectual defense of ourselves when we're being accused of a crime. That's part of our of being a citizen, part of being American, right? She says that we should abolish all prisons. Well, Cenk Uygur says, well, what do we do with the people who can't be reformed by whatever measures she hadn't even gone into details with, right? But let's give her that they will find some social engineering, some clockwork orange type brainwashing mechanism to change most criminals. Well, what about the people who you can't change, who want to just kill people, who want to just RAPE people? What do we do with them? Her answer was, well, I don't know. We'll have to figure it out. Like this is insanity.
So
It's
let's just send
insanity.
them back out on the street. We'll figure it
Yeah,
out.
we'll figure it out. It's the same concept of, you know, Michael Henry, who is the Republican candidate who's running against Letitia James, who is the Attorney General for New York. He says, "Hey, we need to change bail reform," and the Attorney General can't change bail reform in New York, but
Right.
the Attorney General and the governor can use their bully pulpits to say we need to change it. So if the top law enforcement officer, who's the Attorney General in New York, says bail reform is not working, we need to change it, people are going to listen, or at least the voters would know what they need to do come these midterms and these general elections to change it, right? She says, I'm not willing to change bail reform because I need more data. But what
Right.
exactly does more data mean? More data means more dead people, more people
Right.
victims of assault, people who get their houses broken into. So you want to create more victims before you finally see what's already in your face. So this is the feedback we're getting from this activist culture and the people who have been voted in off the strength of those activist waves, right? They don't care about regular people. And one more thing that you spoke about that stood out to me is the fact that none of these folks are trying to actually invest in keeping these kids out of prison and
Right.
in changing the culture that makes them get police contact. Now, my experience is anecdotal. It's not scientific. I'm only can tell you what I experienced growing up in a very dangerous community during the crack epidemic. But my experience is that the people who had no other than stop and frisk. And I will tell anybody stop and frisk was unconstitutionally done by the NYPD. It was a harassment tactic that became a numbers driven quota tactic. So these cops were out there not even just because you were black were they stopping you. They were stopping you because they needed to bring into the station house a certain amount of numbers so that they don't get punished themselves.
Right.
So they actually had an incentive to stop random African Americans for two reasons. Two reasons that I now realize was just the basis of these stops. Number one, the African American community didn't know their rights. Why? Because I got stopped a dozen times and I didn't know my rights. I didn't know that I could sue. I didn't know that there was internal affairs I could have called. I didn't know that there was a civilian review complaint board that I could have made a complaint with. I didn't know none of that stuff. The only thing I know was, yo, F these cops keep harassing me every time I go to the corner store. And that's most black people. Not maybe not now, but back then. Now everybody knows they can sue. But back then, no. That's number one. Number two, these folks are policing communities that they have no affinity to. The people that policing don't talk like them, act like them. They don't look like their relatives, don't look like their sons and their daughters, their sisters, their brothers. So it's easy to disassociate yourself with them. And then
Right.
three, it's a high crime community. There is legitimate crime coming through here. You are legitimately being called to people's homes to deal with domestic violence issues and thefts and rapes and murders and all that stuff. So that also can skew your view of this population that you're policing. Well, the bottom line is, and I lost my point. I ain't with
That
that.
was all relevant.
It was completely all relevant. You know what I mean? But oh yeah, but the bottom line is they don't want to do anything to prevent people from going into those situations. And the point that I was making was that if you weren't, other than stop and frisk, if you weren't doing bad, 9 times out of 10, the cops weren't bothering you.
Right.
They weren't even in the depths of Harlem in the hood. They weren't bothering you, other than stop and frisk, which was artificially thrust upon these communities by the mayor and police brass,
Hmm.
forcing these cops to do these things. Other than that, the cops didn't bother you unless you were a criminal. So why aren't these activists, and this is going to turn into a question for you on what you
Okay.
think about it, why aren't these politicians and activists asking for increased funding for schools, after school programs, trade schools, scholarships for colleges, parenting classes, home ec to teach people how to manage credit cards, checkbooks, stocks, and all that good stuff? Why aren't they asking for these things instead of wanting to release people from prison after they've already created a victim?
Right. Well, there doesn't seem to be a connection to them. I Part of it is like I just got in an argument with like an older listener to my show from before, and they're like, you need to address the systemic issues, this and that, and I'm like, no, that's true, but like until we fix the culture to get these kids to value those things, none of it matters. Like that's it's like until they have, but until we get rid of this, root out this evil gang culture that's destroying these kids' lives. Like that's just got to go. Like at some point, you should. I can get you in touch with him. You should talk to Pastor Corey Brooks because you'd really like him because he is doing those things, and he struggles for funding. Meanwhile,
I would
BLM is
love to
just
speak
sitting
to him.
on. Yeah,
I would
he's
love to. I
awesome.
would love to speak to him. And
Right on
and
the
I, and
streets of Chicago.
not to cut you off, but
No,
just
go
to
ahead.
say that that's one complaint I get from a lot of my African American viewers. They say, "Well, you don't highlight enough African Americans who are doing good," and my response to that is, number one, it's hard to get them on the show. Believe me, I
Hmm.
try. I reach out to people, and most of them don't want to come on smaller platforms. And number two, um, the violence that we do see, it's on crisis level. That's why I put it on Front Street. We're literally, to me, in a genocide. But please keep going.
Well, right. It just basically they don't want to. There can't be any self-reflection in it. Like, and unfortunately, because certain right-wing pundits make this point that is a valid point, even if it's coming from the right wing. Like there's a quintessential moment. The first video that had Ben Shapiro in it that I ever watched was him debating a couple of Black Lives Matter people, and they talked about, is this systemic racism? He says it has nothing to do with race and has everything to do with culture. And they laughed at him, and then he just kind of sat there for a second. He went, "All right, then you tell me, why are they not?" And he has all the statistics because he's Ben Shapiro. Why are they not graduating high school? Why are they having kids? As teenagers, why, just goes down the list of all of the things that are destroying the people who live in those communities of any color who live there, right? And they didn't have an answer. They literally just went silent. Like they did not even try to answer him. Like it was funny because they went from laughing at him like it was the most ridiculous thing they had ever heard to just going quiet. And there was I remember another debate. It was a black panel, and Candace Owens is the only conservative sitting there, and she rattles off the same points about what's going on in the gang culture that's bringing down the black community. And then they all kind of grumble at him and then grumble at her. And I'm trying to remember what the guy's name was, but he endorsed Bernie Sanders, very large black gentleman who's an activist. He's like, you guys are all spitting at her, but this is stuff that Louis Farrakhan's been saying to you guys for years. And everybody started cheering all of a sudden because they dropped Louis Farrakhan's name. So the point is that it almost seems like they don't and ever want to address that any of it could in any way be the responsibility of the people living in those communities. No,
Mm.
they didn't put themselves there. That's how they were, just through, yes, there's ancestral poverty. I'm not going to lie about that, obviously.
Hmm.
But at the same time, okay, but now how long are you going to let that control your life? What part of this is in your control, and take control of it? That has to happen or it won't
Well, I
matter.
want to jump
Go
in because
ahead.
I want to dive deeper into this before we get to this video. I definitely want to dive deeper into this because I agree with you that poverty has something to do with it. Probably a good significant proportion of it, like a
Sure.
solid percentage of it. But at the same time, because I'm always on a journey to learn, V. That's why I love having people like you in my circle and other people, that educated lady,
Yeah, she was cool.
all these other people. I like to absorb and get these different perspectives. If
Right.
you go to a hood in New York, and that's just New York, the richest state in the country, probably, right?
Hmm.
The poor are walking around with Yeezys that cost $300. The poor are walking around with Michael Jordan sneakers that cost $200, with Versace belts, with Louis Vuitton bags, and they're real. When I go to
Right.
downtown Manhattan to handle business, they have a whole bunch of counterfeit luxury bag sellers. There are white females buying those bags. You in the black community, if you're found with a knockoff luxury brand, you are scorned. You're literally viewed as a loser. So when you see a black person walking around with a luxury bag, it's real. So
Right.
we're talking about poverty being a catalyst for this violence and this culture of violence. And I do agree, but how do we explain the violence that we find in a place like New York, where if you have income instability, New York City and state will pay your rent? And then so we have a group of people who have no issues with income in terms,
Right.
or rather with housing, rather, and we're luxury goods. So there's a big difference between the poor in New York and the poor in Mississippi or the poor in Rwanda. But we're not even going to say Rwanda because that's too extreme. Let's just keep it with America.
Sure.
There's a big difference between the poor in New York and the poor in Michigan, the poor in New York and the poor in Oklahoma, the poor in New York and the poor in St. Louis. Explain to me why there still is so much violence, if you can, when yet they're surrounded by so much opportunity.
Well, one of the things you said there that kind of rang true because I grew up in those neighborhoods is I remember the triple fat goose, extremely expensive jackets that kids would wear. I remembered the extremely expensive shoes. And I remember also the culture being very vicious against anybody who didn't have those things. It's highly materialistic. I mean, not that that's unique to the ghetto because, like, like my son goes to school in a country school now, and, the rich kids look down on all the poor kids. But it's interesting though is that they make those investments that are not necessarily good for them, living beyond their means, and they're doing it because that their culture venerates that. Obviously, you watch the rap, music videos, they're all like, they got all this money in their hands, and they're driving around in cars, and they got all kinds of girls with them. Like there's something about it that leads them to that conclusion. But so then they start looking for the shortest path to get there, and unfortunately that's crime. It's just easier to make money as a drug dealer than it is to get a job. And then if you do get a job, it is a culture that, just like the education, people who get a job, frequently that's something that's looked down on too. It's not gangster enough, I guess. But so when it comes to the violence, that's another thing, is that it's I was just studying, well, actually, the Hill video that we talked about earlier, they talked about like an honor culture, which is just a translation
Mm,
to like, it's my obligation that if I have to protect my reputation at all costs. So that means that if you do something to diss me, then I need to shoot you,
right.
or I'm not a man,
See, I call
or,
that the real toxic masculinity, not the feminine, culture of calling it toxic masculinity every time a man stand up for himself.
well,
I'm
the thing is,
talking. I call
okay, go
that
ahead.
real toxic masculinity. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, just ghetto girls though, they do it too.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll show up with six of them, to grab your hair
Yeah,
and throw you around. I mean, it's
right.
terrible.
But they're
You
not
know,
killing people like that,
no, not quite.
right? I
But
mean,
they
some of them
definitely get
do, but
violent.
definitely not at the rates of males. But keep
Right.
going. Mhm.
I just, it basically comes down to the fact that nobody wants to address that, because again, that would require too much self-reflection. And the
Right,
grift seems to be based on the idea that everything needs to be about blaming white people who don't even live there. And the ones who
right,
do live there are certainly not part of your oppression problem, because they're the forgotten white trash. There's a scene in the movie Lean on Me where Morgan Freeman's character, that is based on a real person, asks the white students to stand up and points out that they're the exact same situation that, that the rest of the kids in the school are. And that meant a lot to me because I was one of those white trash kids going to a ghetto school. And I remember very clearly what that was about, but
Mm.
in order to get these solutions, the kind of social change activism that they're applying instead on trying to play the blame game on people who are not part of the situation, not part of their environment, should
Mm.
instead be placed upon, if you want to be free, embrace your education. Like, look at some of the weird ways, it's like I've said this before. As I look more closely at racial activism, it almost seems like whoever is currently behind the wheel is diabolically racist because in the
Mm.
schools, they want us to say, well, if a kid from the ghetto can't spell or speak correctly, then you're
Right.
supposed to let them do that because it's their vernacular. And
No.
that enraged me
Mm-mm-mm.
because I'm like, I seem to recall watching a film about Frederick Douglass when I was younger, and that he was being taught to read, even though it was illegal. Like
Right.
that people of color had to fight for the right to learn to read. So now
Right.
the answer somehow is to suggest that to protect a black person's freedom, I don't teach them to read or expect them to read. Like, how the
Mm.
hell do you square that? That was like, no, just teach them to read. What the hell is this about?
Absolutely.
And then you couple that with just other weird things like, now they shame, celebrities for marrying white people. I'm like, well, that's
Mm.
interesting. So we're back to hating race mixing again. What does that
Right.
sound like? That doesn't sound like pro black activism. That sounds like something else. And then you couple that with things we've talked about, like, then you encourage them to destroy their own communities, which ruins
Mm.
them and causes more poverty, eliminates jobs, which in turn creates more crime. It almost seems to me like, especially when you look at the grifters,
Mm.
if we cured racism tomorrow, Black Lives Matter stands to lose a lot of money. If we cured racism tomorrow, people like Ivermex Kendi might have to get a real job instead of spending 45 minutes on a Zoom call and getting paid $25,000 for his time. He didn't even have to
Mm.
go to the school. Like, and it bothers me. In addition to the fact that it also helps the actual racists because
Right.
it helps them recruit. The funny thing is that this is something Martin Luther King understood. If the problem is that people of color are being um, profiled as violent criminals, why would it make any sense to encourage people of color to be violent criminals? You
Right.
know, and then that's where it becomes a situation where it just feels like it's a racism factory, and all the while they're telling us if we don't like it, we're the ones who are pushing racism. You
Right.
know, and it just doesn't make any sense.
Man, I don't know, man. One thing you said that really stood out to me that I agree with is that it does appear to me that the very same people who proclaim themselves to be allies to the black cause because they're not always black, or down for the cause because they are black, are the very same people who do seem to be racist, or at
Right,
least they have such low expectations of black people that, as you said, you know, you don't even have to hold black people to the same standard as everybody else.
right,
That's boggles my mind. Don't teach a kid how to read. How is that going to benefit them? How is he supposed to survive in the corporate world? Because what the agenda that these folks are pushing is not the agenda that the rest of the world follows by. Once you leave that bubble of your inner city with your ultra liberal legislatures and your activists who are pounding, boots on the streets, everywhere else doesn't go by those rules. So you're going to get a kid that's ill equipped to go to a different community or even their own community and succeed. So now they go to try and get a corporate job. They can't get a job because they can't write, they can't speak, they can't express themselves, you know? And it does nothing but hold the African American community behind. The African American community has made a history out of defying odds and pushing through adversity and demanding equal treatment from as everybody else who's getting in America. And now it seems like in this day and age in 2022, the goal is to dumb down those demands, dumb down those rights, and create some type of acceptable second class citizenry where being lesser than thou is somehow good, man. Listen, we're about to jump into this video. Please do me
I
a favor,
wanted.
everybody.
Oh, I just want to make one
Mm,
more point that I forgot.
sure.
Um, they're trying to bring segregation back too.
Yeah.
Like we need to make safe spaces where there are no white people allowed. Like
I
again,
was
so
just
I'm
watching that on a black supremacist. Like, I mean, I said the black supremacist. You know, I shouldn't have drunk it. This was freaking beer. I'm like a lightweight, and what is wrong with me? The bottom line is, the black conservative perspective. I saw a video that he did on these two girls who were claiming that some white guys were, threatening them racially or something to that effect, and then it ended up finding out that they were guilty of doing that against those white students, and their thing is they wanted a safe space where these white guys couldn't go on campus in a library. Can
right.
you believe that shit?
Yeah, I watched that video, and it was like, you have the whole all the rest of the campus. This is our space, and again, they fought to end segregation. And if you look, the funny thing is, if you read critical race theory and its founding documents, it's
Right.
pro segregation. It's
That's
also pro black nationalism too. Like,
I'm
and
not
that's
interested in
not
any of
like Tucker Carlson. That's me reading Kimberly
it. Right,
Crenshaw.
right. Well, a lot of people don't read these things,
Right,
and most black people don't want that. We're not interested in that. We want to live our lives. We want to be
right,
who we want to be with. We want to have the same opportunities that everybody else has. Not equality of outcome, but just opportunity. That's it. But
right.
I want to jump into this video because I want to play it in its entirety. So we're definitely going to have more than an hour worth of show, probably going towards 2 hours. And plus, it'll give me some time to process this grapefruit beer. What is this? Hoffenweisen or something? I don't know. Somebody tell me how to say that in the comment section. But before we do that, please hit that like button. Please hit the like button, support the channel, support V Radio. We're gonna put his links and all that inside the description section. Go and subscribe to his channel. He won't be pushing out content until his YouTube jail bit is done. But after that, he will be pushing out content. And he has an amazing show, absolutely amazing show. I'm a big fan of his show. So please support V Radio. But before you do that, you're here right now. You're watching the Strategic Guys show. Please make sure that you're hitting that like button. And if you're over here from V Radio's channel and you haven't subscribed to my channel, please consider doing that now. And I definitely encourage everybody, and I do it all the time, who is a subscribe channel, to also subscribe to V Radio and everybody else who's a friend of the show, because it's only through this network of small YouTube channels that you're going to get the truth, because everybody else is bought and paid off. And guess what? We ain't making no money. So there's no
Right.
incentive for us to lie to you. All right. So I'm gonna jump in here with this video. Like I said, I'm gonna play it in its entirety. We will be stopping at some points to discuss some things, but definitely you guys need to hear everything that's said here. Big shout out to the Hill. I'm using this as free. What do you call it?
Fair
what do you
use.
call
Fair
it?
use.
Fair use. Fair use. See, it's the bear kicking in. So I'm using this as fair use, and we definitely want you to go subscribe to the Hill as well. All right, please don't copyright me, Hill. Let's keep going.
Bacho, what's on your radar?
Crime has emerged as one of the top issues on voters' minds in the lead up to the midterm elections, now just 2 weeks away. Fully 80% of Americans told Gallup pollsters that they are worried about crime, including 43% of Democrats who worry about crime a great deal. A Morning Consult political poll found similar numbers. Over 3/4 of respondents said violent crime is a major problem in the United States, with 60% saying crime would play a major role in who they vote for in November. And a News Nation poll of registered voters found that 85% of respondents said crime was either somewhat or very important to their decision about who they would vote for. From Minnesota to New York to Philadelphia to Texas to Oklahoma, voters are worried about their safety. They are right to worry. Homicides rose 5% last year, as did aggravated assaults, while gun assaults have increased by 8%. The murder rate is 44% higher than it was in 2019. Burglary is down from last year, but carjacking is up by 14%, and domestic violence is up by 4%. and it's impacting races across the country. In New York, Republican Lee Zeldin is closing in on Kathy Hochul in the race for governor, putting him in spitting distance of a role that a Republican hasn't held for 20 years. It's a feat he accomplished by focusing much of his campaign on crime, a theme for which the city provided him ample fodder. Crime then came home for Zeldin, quite literally. There was a shooting outside his house a few weeks ago while his teenage daughters were home, and he himself was accosted by an assailant holding a knife-like object on stage at a campaign.
There's only one option. No. You're done. You're done. You're done. You are done.
Whoa! Whoa!
Zeldin's assailant was released almost immediately without bail, a perfect example of the theme of the Zeldin campaign. In response, the New York Times published an article pushing a conspiracy theory about whether Zeldin supporters were behind his assailant's release. It later emerged that the man was a veteran and an addict, and he is now in rehab, something Zeldin condoned.
I want to jump in real quick here because I looked this up, guys. and for anybody who doesn't know, Lee Zeldin is the guy that I plan on voting for governor of New York State. Right. And this guy is not out there talking about any type of identity politics stuff. He's not saying he's going to take away abortion or LGBTQ rights. He's an economic and crime guy, period. Right? Now, in this New York Times article, I read the entire thing. Never knew about before. I knew Lee Zeldin got attacked, but I didn't know about this article written by the New York Times. They definitely, as the presenter stated, tried to make it seem as though not that Lee Zeldin set up that attack, but that the DA in the county where he was attacked purposely downplayed the charges on that veteran so that he could be released with no bail. And Lee Zeldin can then say, look, this is an example of the terrible bail reform. I got attacked and my attacker got released right away. That is a total and whole crock of crap. And the reason why is that this young lady said he had a knife-like object. He didn't. He had a cat keychain. The keychain was a plastic keychain of a cat with cat ears. That's what he had in his hand. And that plastic keychain couldn't stab or cut anybody. It was not sharp. It was not hard enough to penetrate anybody's skin. And what they did was they charged him with second-degree attempted assault. To me, that's too much. They could not charge him with anything more than that. In fact, what we saw there was at least harassment, and if you stretched it, assault in the third degree, only because he pulled Lee Zeldin down a little bit, and Lee Zeldin could then say, oh, I hurt my knee. If Lee Zeldin says, I'm not hurt at all, then you can't even charge him with misdemeanor assault in the third degree. What that man did was harassment. If anything, he came up on the stage, he grabbed Lee Zeldin's arm and said, you're done, you're done, you're done, you're done, you're done. And then they both fell to the ground, pulling Lee Zeldin down with him. That was it. That was it. But as soon as the liberal folks see this, they say, oh, he was undercharged so that he doesn't get bail. No, you got to understand, even if you charge him with assault in the third degree, let's say he punched Lee Zeldin in the face, that's still a non-bailable crime, meaning you get released without bail. That's the law that they passed in New York State. If he had a slapped the crap at Lee Zeldin, punched Lee Zeldin in the face, make his nose bleed, chipped his tooth, the whole nine, he still would get out without no bail. And to say that this was some type of ploy is just ridiculous because all they did was follow the law. That's all they did. And it's amazing how the very same people who back these laws that are light on crime love to flip the script and make it seem like it's not what it really is. It's not what they made it, man. What do you think about that before we go any further?
Well, I think it's important that I mean the guy did get up and more or less him and tell him you're done, you're done, like try to stop him. So that's serious, but at the same time,
it's not serious in New York State.
It's not serious. Grab someone like that.
Well, it's not serious for you to get up and grab somebody in New York State. No, it's not serious for you to threaten somebody. You have to say certain types of threats, like I'm gonna blow this place up or something. That's a terrorist threat. But you could tell somebody, you could punch them in their face. It's just harassment. That's it. It's a violation.
Okay.
or low-level misdemeanor. In New York, remember, every state has their own laws. In New York, it's not serious. It's a low-level misdemeanor that you get arrested for, and then you'd be released straight from the station house, or you would go down to the court. If you have warrants, you go down to the court, and then the court will release you. If you don't have warrants, you would literally be released from the police station in New York State.
So I guess as far as to what's going on with him, as far as his positions, is that he's going to be tough on crime, and the economics, and if the left continues to allow the crime to go out of control, everybody's going to prioritize that. Everybody's going to think it's the most important issue. They want to be able to walk down the street and not get mugged, or shot, or raped, or whatever. You can't have basic security. You can't have any. What good does it do? You got killed by a criminal. So I hope they realize where this is headed, because it's going to end up being a real problem. We can't discuss any other issue if we can't be safe just in casual life.
Now, some people on the side of the chat are saying that you're echoing.
I do hear that. I don't know how.
So I think what happens, I've seen this before, is when we're sharing like this third screen with this video, you get the echo. Okay. So I think what might happen, what needs to happen is like we need to mute ourselves in between talking, and then the chat will let us know if we got any better.
Got it.
All right, so I'm going to mute myself, and we're going to play the video.
Okay.
For her part, Hochul has pushed for a rollback of the controversial progressive bail reform law, and her latest ad focused on crime. Let's watch that.
A safe walk home at night, a subway ride free of fear, a safer New York for every child. That's what Kathy Hochul is working for as governor, and she passed a comprehensive crime plan to make it happen. It goes after illegal guns to make our neighborhoods safer, toughens bail laws to keep repeat offenders off our streets, and gets help for the homeless and those suffering with mental illness.
You deserve to feel safe. And as your governor, I won't stop working until you do.
If Hochul wins, she will have done so by at least making a show of caring about crime, which meant breaking with progressives on the issue. But New York was just one of many races that zeroed in on crime, something both Republicans and Democrats have mentioned in campaign ads, with Democrats actually bringing up crime even more than Republicans. It was the third most common theme in their ads, as opposed to the fourth for Republicans. But Republicans are clearly seen by voters as the party that cares more about the issue and has a better chance of tackling it, which is no surprise given that high-profile Democrats and progressives have repeatedly dismissed voters' concerns with crime, casting the fears of regular Americans as hysteria, a reflection of conservative fear-mongering. You have to wonder, is it really wise to gaslight voters and tell them they're wrong to care about what they're telling you they care about? Crime has become the new what's the matter with Kansas, except now instead of accusing people of being hypnotized by conservative media into voting against their economic interests, progressives accuse working class Americans experiencing a real rise in violent crime of inventing the cars that have been jacked, the purses that have been snatched, the beatings they've sustained on the subway, and the loved ones they have lost to a rising murder rate. The latest tactic of the progressive blue check Twitterati has been to point out that the murder rate has risen mostly in states that voted for Donald Trump. They've taken to calling the rise in crime the, quote, red state murder problem to reflect the fact that the top 10 murder rates in the U.S. are almost all in states that Donald Trump won. This talking point became a flashpoint during a gubernatorial debate in Oklahoma last week, when the Democratic candidate Joy Hoffmeister pointed out that Oklahoma has a higher murder rate than New York. Watch.
The fact is, the rates of violent crime are higher in Oklahoma under your watch than in New York and California. That's a fact.
Well, we'll have that fact checked by the Frontier Superintendent.
It's also a fact that medical marijuana...
All right, I want you guys to pay close attention to what they're saying right now, all right? This is This is big right here because this is a lot of misinformation we've been fed for a long time about crime rates. Listen to this.
Do you believe we have higher crime than New York or California? That's what she just said.
Safety and security is my top priority, and it will be as governor.
It's an interesting clip because Hoffmeister is technically correct. Oklahoma does have a higher murder rate than New York. But when Governor Kevin Stitt got the audience to laugh at Hoffmeister based on how they feel about that data point, they weren't wrong either, because murder in red states is extremely concentrated in cities with Democratic mayors and in specific communities.
Now, didn't the Strategic Eyes show talk about this before, guys? I told you guys that these Republican states have high murder rates because of the Democratic cities where all of the crime occurs in. I've said this before. We had a whole live. I spoke for like 2 hours when I explained how this actually works. All it takes is 5 to 10 minutes of you doing a very quick Google search, and you will get something that the mainstream media does not like to give you. It's called data. It's called numbers. Let's keep going.
And this is the part that Democrats don't want to talk about. Progressives are right that New York City and California don't rank high in murder per 100,000 people. And they are right that the top 10 murder rates per 100,000 in the U.S. are in places like Mississippi, Louisiana, Kentucky, Alabama, Missouri, and South Carolina. The South has historically always been more violent, the result of what social psychologist Richard E. Nisbett called the culture of honor, in which a man's reputation is central to his economic survival, which makes violent retaliation against symbolic slights more of a norm in the South than elsewhere. We also know that poverty is intimately correlated with violent crime, and southern states continue to rank poorer than northern ones. And it's true that rural America has also seen a rise in murder rates since the pandemic began, up to 25%. And yet,
V, anytime you want me to stop it, just hit me and say, "Hey, Strategic, can you stop it?" If you want to say something, and I'll stop the video.
Oh no, go ahead. No, go ahead.
When you look at the cities that have the highest murder rate per 100,000, they are cities led by Democratic mayors: Philadelphia, Memphis, Detroit, Milwaukee, Atlanta, Kansas City, Louisville. Take these cities out of the equation and the murder rate in those red states plummets. Worse, if you look at the FBI's new crime data, which was released on October 5th, it's clear that a disproportionately high percentage of murder victims are Black Americans. Take Oklahoma, a state that's over 70% white and just 7% Black, yet Black Americans represented 36% of the victims of homicide in Oklahoma. Or take Louisiana, a state that is 32% Black, in which Black Americans represented fully 77% of the homicide victims, according to this data. In Mississippi, Black Americans represented over 80% of the victims of homicide. New York is just 15% Black, but Black Americans represented 65% of homicide victims, the FBI data show.
And I want to say that she's wrong on that one last point, because we've been talking about this for a long time. I'm going to put my video up here. New York does not represent 65% of victims. New York represents 67% of victims. 67% of homicide victims are Black people in New York. And I've been covering this for the last couple of days, so I know what the hell I'm talking about. This is the NYPD. You know, she's 100% right.
So,
you know why she's right, V Radio? Because she said the whole damn state, and I'm only talking about New York City. Go ahead, V.
Okay, looks like I am echoing.
Let me try by putting my my voice on mute.
Okay. Testing. Sounds like I'm still echoing. Hello. All right. Well, now I can't hear myself, so good. What I was going to say is that their framing of it to make it look like basically to suggest that it's still just Republicans' fault, and it's because people voted for Donald Trump, and that's why all the violence is happening. As if the fact that there are people who voted for Donald Trump in your state leads to violence. That's what leads to crime. Because again, they always have to link everything back to Trump, even if it's in this weird, irrational way. Right. I was talking to Good Logic yesterday about that. I can't even have a rational conversation with people about what problems I do have with Trump, because people are just immune to listening to it anymore because they get lied to all the time about him with weird, irrational statements like that. It's like, oh, it must be Trump's fault somehow. Just like racism supposedly just magically came back because of Trump's election. It couldn't have anything to do with them constantly attacking white people or doing all the things that racists claim that people of color do. It has to just be Donald Trump. It's all Trump, 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 Trump. And they never want to discuss the fact that I think the real reason that they oppose him is because he's anti-war. But regardless, this is definitely just classic misdirection away from the truth of the situation that none of them want to face. And, the people who are in that situation, it's much easier for them to blame it on some exterior than it is for them to face what they'll have to do to fix it.
Right. I agree 1000%. I do know how we solve the issue for now, at least. Hopefully there'll be a workaround for this in the future. In order to eliminate the echo for you when you're talking, I have to basically remove the shared screen where the video is being played.
Right.
So
I see that because it's working fine now.
Yeah, when you want to talk, I have no problem being the control guy, the producer. Just let me know, and I'll definitely take off that screen so that you can get the floor and say whatever you need to say.
You got it.
All right, let me bring that screen back up and let's keep going.
The FBI data also shows that, as in other cases, the vast majority of this crime is intraracial, meaning it is committed by people of the same race as their victims. Look, it's important to bear in mind that the FBI data is incomplete. The FBI is completing the process of switching from a system that counted criminal episodes with one that counts individual crimes, and not all precincts have reported their statistics yet. But what data we have is appalling. There is a massacre going on of people who have an 80% likelihood of being Democratic voters. It's rather cynical, given this data, to crow about a red state murder problem. What could possibly justify the erasure of these victims from the public discourse on the left? There are a number of reasons that I believe Democrats and progressives don't want to talk about crime. For starters, of course, it's always difficult to take responsibility that's happening on your watch. And this is absolutely happening on Democrats and progressives' watch. Bail reform may not alone be the source of the problem, but combine it with a defund the police ethos that demonized law enforcement and a prosecutorial approach like Alvin Bragg's that declines to prosecute quality of life infractions and even gun possession, and suddenly all roads are leading to favoring criminals over their victims, which of course leads to more crime. There are also some more justifiable reasons for the taboo on discussing crime. The right spent years trying to shut down important conversations about police reform by asking, what about black-on-black crime? A racist deflection from an entrenched struggle Black Americans face to secure equality before the law. I think there is also genuine cause for concern for mass incarceration, both from a fiscal and a spiritual point of view. But just 1 in 5 people in prison or jail are there for a nonviolent drug offense. Nearly 3/5 of people in state prison are there for violent offenses. Decarceration attempts all too often.
Now, I do agree that I guess in some instances people could suggest that black-on-black crime is like somehow a racist distraction or something. I've heard that before. The problem is that
how I could agree with that, but go ahead.
Right. I'm just saying that's what people say it, but it's just like the thing is that that's not their point. Their point is that, like, and you watched my video on police shootings. We're talking about something that killed 259 Black people in 2019, as opposed to something that killed 7,832 Black people in 2019. Right. Like, why is one of those things more important than the other? And it's just bizarre.
It gets deeper than that, and you know it, but I want to make sure that the audience knows it. Right. Yeah, 209, but only 15 to 20 of them were unarmed. Those like 95% of that 209 were people who had guns and knives, who were Black and shot by the cops.
Well, and the fact that we're talking about out of millions of police interactions where nobody got killed. Millions.
Millions. Absolutely. And then we go to the murder rate and we see more Black people being killed than white people in America from each other.
Right.
when there's like over 200 million white people and there's only 41 million black people. So it's definitely a genocide. But like the reason why I never agree with it, V, and I understand what you're saying. You're being political and you're saying, maybe there might be some, but we all know, as you were saying, in fact, the point you were making, we all know that people kill amongst their own race because they're killing the people in their community. It takes a lot to go out of your community into a different community and kill somebody for no reason. People killing them, people that they know, that they talk to, their neighbors, they have disputes with, their lovers that they have domestic violence with. They're killing within their community. The problem why people say black on black crime and highlight it is because it's happening so disproportionately. Because it's happening to such a small minority. It's happening so much more so than any other race in raw numbers for a population that only encompasses 13% of the American population. That's it. There are more Latinos in America than black people, and that's because we typically group Latinos together regardless of what country they come from. It's like 20-something percent, correct? Something to that effect.
Yeah, something to that effect.
Yeah. I mean, ridiculous. You should fear your neighbor more than you fear a white guy.
Who was it?
Or specifically a white cop. Yeah.
Chris Rock said that like if you're a black guy at your ATM, you're not looking around for white people. You're looking around for another black person.
Yo, dude, like, listen. There was a time when if I'm talking to a Caucasian person like yourself, and you said something like that, I'd have felt some type of way. Like, what are you trying to say?
Well, yeah, I'm just quoting Chris Rock, but
I got you.
Right.
But then you grow up and you realize it's a fucking truth. I've never in my almost 40 years on this earth feared that a white person was going to hurt me. And I've driven through places with Ku Klux Klan and Confederate flags in New York, because I used to travel all in New York when I worked for the state government. I used to travel all over the place, and I'd be like, oh, that guy's stupid. He's got a Confederate flag on his car. I never felt like, oh, he's going to kill me. But I've been to so many countless places in the hood where I felt like, yo, you got to be about your whips because you could possibly die. So my moderators, please hear those the spam that's coming into the chat room.
Yep.
So it's the fucking truth, V, and we need to have this conversation. We need to deprogram people to actually explore and confront these truths. Otherwise, I don't know what the hell is going to happen with America, V.
There was a video that a black gentleman had on YouTube, and I think he actually unfortunately deleted it, but he just went off and said, it's not like there's white people waiting in the bushes in our communities, to get us. And he's like, it's not white people that are putting all of the graffiti on our, in our neighborhoods. It's not white people, it's like, he was just going down the list of like, yes, in history, terrible things were done by people who happened to be white, but we are destroying ourselves is basically what he was getting at. And I would again extend that to all the races who live there, because the Asian gangs are tough, the Hispanic gangs are tough, and it's like, in fact, in Pontiac, for whatever reason, the Hispanic gangs are actually the biggest of the three, and that's the ghetto that I grew up in. But they can't until we get a chance to really evaluate this part of it. Like I said, that's why I keep saying they don't want to invest any time in that. And I think part of it is that they might have to actually spend the money at that point. If you give the money to Corey Brooks, something's going to happen. There's going to be a community center, where he's going to introduce young black youths, or really any poor kid he'll help, to, an electrician who's going to make them an apprentice. And then they're going to be bringing in like, $30 an hour, and they're going to have a beautiful home. And, well, we don't want that. We need to have some excuse to give our baby mama almost $1 million, or baby daddy almost $1 million for quote unquote creative work.
Right.
The whole thing is just an enormous grift, and that money's still just sitting there. But like, it almost seems to me like they don't want that change to happen, or nothing else. The other thing that critical race theory says is that supposedly integration is an attempt of a genocide on black culture. And I was trying to scratch my head going, what are they talking about? Like, there is black culture, but like it's not like these people are going back to find out who their African ancestors are, and like, I mean, because that's what I did. I
Right.
for one thing, I found out I had a black ancestor, so I checked out Senegal. But I'm also into my Irish culture. I'm into my, they're not doing that. But what do they mean by black culture?
Mm,
What is the thing that they're worried is going to go away? If and the other thing is that it's not like it's American culture that you're getting
yeah.
assimilated into, not white culture.
Right.
You become Americanized. Does anybody say that a Japanese family that lives over here is like fourth generation, speaks, acts, and talks, just like everyone else who lives here, celebrates Thanksgiving, things that they don't do in Japan? Did we
Mm,
genocide their culture? Is that
mm,
what happened? No, they
mm.
moved here. They became
Right. Right.
Americans.
Absolutely. Big shout out to David S. First of all, David S. sent us a 199 super chat when he was alerting us to the fact that we had an echo. So we appreciate that. And David S. just sent another 999 super chat. And he says, in my opinion, after Obama was elected, the left felt that they were losing the narrative that America is racist. So they had to crank up the rhetoric even more. What do you think about that, V?
Um, that's an interesting point. And it's because one of the reasons, because when they try to suggest that racism is such a huge problem, Obama's election is kind of a huge slap in the face to that idea. And if you bring it up, then they'll create these weird voodoo-like beliefs that somehow the country could still be majority racist and then elect a black president. And I would say that I would tend to agree that because they need to really believe in this victimness. It's like it really makes them feel good to have an enemy to fight, and I don't know. I know that to me that was kind of a sign of the times of like, wow, things are really changing. But like what I'd be concerned about is that, and the funny thing is they blame Obama for their racism jump. I actually don't think he had much to do with it. And but on the same token, Trump getting elected didn't suddenly make it happen either. I think if there was any racism increase, it was due to the stupid, incompetent, quote unquote activism, or maybe they're not stupid. Maybe they're not stupid. Maybe they're literally trying to sabotage the civil rights movement for some reason. That's because that's what's causing it. It's not the election of the last two presidents, but I will
Mhm.
say that him getting elected is kind of like we just said,
Mhm.
it's like, how can you continue to say that this is a hugely racist, white supremacist country if such a man could be elected? And to be honest with you, if he ran again, if it was possible, he'd probably win again.
You probably would. The funny thing about Obama is, number one, he was overwhelmingly elected by white people. Number two, he didn't really talk much about race unless he really, really had to. Like there was a national outcry. Like I think Trayvon Martin is like he said that he looked like he could have been my son if I had one or something like that.
Right.
But I think a lot of people get misconstrued as to why Trump was elected. Trump was elected because the Democrats tried to give us Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
I remember
Not
a study
give,
was
more like cram down our
crammed
throats.
down our throats, and everybody hates Hillary.
Right.
And I remember a study being done, and you can't quote me on the numbers, but I'll just the majority, not majority, a large percentage of white people who voted for Obama, a black man, voted for Trump.
Wow.
So we can't say that they voted, not a large, but like a nice percentage. Like it was a long time ago, so I don't remember the numbers. But it's like you'd look and be like, why would they vote? Because they weren't racist people. Not all of those people are labeled racist because they voted for Trump.
Right.
You tried to give us Hillary. That's why people voted for Trump. And tons of Democrats who could not see themselves voting for Trump because at the time, all of that racist stuff for Trump really wasn't being spoken. For the most part, people were just clowning on him for being a reality TV star during the election. Remember that? All
Yep.
that racist stuff didn't start till after he was in office. But like when he was running, people looked at him like he's a joke, like he's not going to win. He's a reality TV star. Nobody cared to dig that deep into Trump. The people who couldn't vote for the reality guy, they just stayed home.
Right. that's actually something Ron Paul points out, that the majority of Americans vote none of the above and just don't go. Like, it's
Yeah.
actually a small percentage of our overall populace that takes part in the process at all. And it's because so many of them are just disaffected and just don't believe that their vote actually counts for anything. Sadly, that's actually not necessarily untrue. But as Lucifer the Doberman points out in your chat, Bernie could have won over Trump, and Bernie actually polled higher than Trump everywhere. Hillary did not. So that's why it didn't make any sense, aside from the fact that I honestly believe that the same kind of people who didn't like Trump because of his war policies wanted Hillary because of her war policies. Like, a lot of experts I've heard have said, for example, that Hillary Clinton would have went ahead and invaded Syria, probably would have, continued this quote unquote war on terror. And they tried to blame sexism and racism. Well, I voted for the Green Party because, and it must be my sexism and racism, because that meant Jill Stein, the woman, and her vice presidential candidate, who is a black person. Yep, that's what it is. It's my racism and my sexism is why I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. No, why I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton is I'll never vote for anybody who voted for Iraq, and that includes Joe Biden, and I'll never vote for anybody who supported NAFTA, because that destroyed our cities. They tried to run an extraordinarily unpopular candidate, and worse than that, especially in 2016, man, they really took out a bullwhip and just went after the progressives who would not just accept Hillary, that really wanted Bernie. And they were nasty. They were rude. They were like, no, you have to vote for Hillary. Like, there's
you're
so many
sexist.
Right, or you're sexist.
This is history. This is history. Another old white guy. This is history. She's going to be the first female president. No, she's corrupt.
Right.
And Bernie certainly would have won, because they did studies too. Right. Statistics was showing that a good proportion of Republicans were willing to vote for Bernie because of his working class views, because of the fact he wanted to bring jobs back to the Midwest. But man, this country would probably be so much different if Bernie was.
Well, and that's what Andrew Yang was trying to tell them when he was on the debate stage. Like, you guys need to understand that Donald Trump is not the source of your problems. Donald Trump is a symptom. He's like a pain signal, because Donald Trump and Bernie were both speaking to the working class.
That's right.
The people that the Democrats have just given up on. They don't care about anymore. Now they think that they're going to win all their elections with, like, the wealthy liberal, they call them the ones that would be at brunch or whatever. That's what Crystal Ball calls them. The point is like the super wealthy Democrat who for some reason claims to be a Democrat, maybe so that they could feel better about themselves for having huge wealth while lots of people are poor. But at the same time, the corporate types, they're starting to lose their grip. Like, early in 2016, because I used to work for political campaigns as a paid analyst, I knew that they were underestimating Donald Trump. I also knew that they were underestimating Bernie. Like, you can go back now, like, somebody put together a compilation of, like, the different times that there were people who said Donald Trump was going to win, and everybody said that was ridiculous, including Barack Obama. Said, you're not going to be president, and then they all look like idiots. I think it was Ann Coulter actually was one of the first conservative pundits who said it's going to be Donald Trump. Everybody laughed at her, right? And on the Bernie side, it was like, the funny thing is I know a lot of Trump supporters who said that they would have went ahead and voted for Bernie if he had been nominated, and there's a lot of them, they're the same kind of people in many cases who would vote for Tulsi Gabbard, I'm like, you realize that Tulsi Gabbard's platform is almost identical to Bernie's, right?
Absolutely.
Like,
she was
we know.
She was a Bernie-crat.
Right. It's just like, but we think she just has so much integrity and she'll keep us out of wars. And I was like, oh, this is fantastic. Right. This should have been the candidate. Like, if they're really worried about trying to recruit Republicans, because I hear Trump supporters tell me all the time they would vote for Tulsi Gabbard. But the point is that there's a corporate establishment that wanted to retain power, and Hillary, there was some kind of deal that was struck to try to get her to back off of Obama. And I think it was kind of like the idea that it was her turn, like she was entitled to the nomination. And, it's just crap. They ran an extraordinarily flawed candidate. And, then they not that Biden was better. That was like, God, the conversations about Biden. So, like, I interviewed Tara Reid, like the woman that he raped, like, and you just get told, well, just put that aside. I'm like, the same people that 5 minutes ago were telling us Justice Kavanaugh, believe all women, all that crap. You got to just totally go along with the Me Too movement. We're like, well, believe all women except for Tara Reid, right?
Right.
And then I'm told, well, now I got to choose between the better of two rapists. It's like, what is the bar? When does the bar suddenly become something more realistic? Is there a point where we can go, okay, we're not going any further? What is the disqualifying factor? Because if it's not, forcing one of your interns up against a wall and driving your finger inside her without her consent, then what is it?
Right. Whatever happened to her? Did the CIA disappear her or something?
No, she still exists. She's around. She's on Twitter. I thought
she got extraordinarily renditioned or something, bro.
No, she's still around. She actually goes to like rallies and stuff, and they ask her to speak sometimes. She went to a Medicare for All rally and was the keynote speaker. She wrote a book too, but like, she's such a sweet lady,
Yeah.
It just
I remember her. I remember how they just swept that under the rug.
Well,
they didn't even make excuses for it. They just didn't cover it. They was like, "Oh, she said that. Okay, let's not talk about that."
And then you got Alyssa Milano, who was like the queen of the Me Too movement, and then Rose McGowan was like, "What the hell's the matter with you?" Because Alyssa Milano was all about Biden, right? And then so she posts in response.
Wait, before you go any further, please hold that thought. Just big shout out to Chris Dreyer with the $10 super chat. He's got a character. For those of you who are not watching from YouTube, it's a character jumping in the air. It's actually very entertaining. Thank you so much, Chris. Keep going, V.
No problem. So like, it's basically the corporate establishment wanted to have control again. And the same thing is happening on the Republican side, which is the reason why you see all of a sudden the left is simping for Liz Cheney. Like Liz Cheney is going to be our, like there's so many leftists on Facebook forums going, "Oh, Liz Cheney, I might vote for Liz Cheney. She's showing so much like, resolve, and she's such a supporter for the Constitution." I'm like, you realize who you're talking about? Like the left has no memory. Like, I don't know if it's just because these young people weren't around for pro-torture, they weren't around for Iraq, and the funny thing is you get told stuff like, "Well, get over it. That was so long ago." I'm like, yeah, like the people of Iraq can just get over it, right? I mean, it just, for me,
but those same people won't say that about slavery, though.
Right? No, they won't. We got to talk about that.
And listen, I'm not saying that we should. I'm just saying that the ideology of those folks, the way that they think, is so selective.
Right. Well, and it's selective, and it's not even. So you watched my video where I reviewed this video that was on the Root channel of the Brittany Cooper, the CRT, professor from Rutgers, who like to explain what critical race theory is and what it's not. And then she said that it's an honest retelling of history. And then in her version of it, like, it was like black people had nothing to do with what happened in slavery. And then we just had that movie that came out where like they really took the tribe that made its entire fortune on slavery.
Did you see that movie?
No, I didn't watch it.
I'm literally gonna boycott that movie, man.
I did the same thing, and it's disappointing because the funny thing is, like, when I was a kid, we watched Shaka Zulu, and I really enjoyed that show. We watched it as a family.
A great show, rather, yeah.
Yeah, and I was looking forward to some more African historical stuff because I like watching it. I've been fascinated by it since I was a kid.
Yo, Jesus Christ, I'm gonna, I gotta expose my children to Shaka Zulu.
Remember, it's violent, but yes.
It's very violent. It's fun. I mean, but the funny thing is they showed it on network TV, which was really weird because
Well, that's why when they're saying stuff like, because she would say that people of color never engaged in imperialism. And remember, this is the same person who says that critical race theory is an accurate historical. I'm like, so I literally in my video about it, I bring up Shaka Zulu's like his entry in like this encyclopedia on literally a black website for historical, black kings. And I'm like, this guy made his whole life being imperialist. It's like, what are you guys talking about? It's not that black people are more likely or less likely than anyone else to be imperialists, but they live in this fictional world where all of that was somehow created by Caucasians. But they've got really bizarre beliefs about who we are too. Like they think we're actually a separate species when you start peeling away the layers. and you start running into these black supremacists who just start talking like Nazi master race theory.
Right.
Like isn't apparently strategic. You have superpowers because of your melanin, so you need to get to work on mastering your superpowers any minute now, right?
Listen, I wish those superpowers would translate to $1 billion, man. It'd be so much better off.
Let's just imagine what we could do. We can make ourselves our
Mhm.
own network studio and stop getting screwed by the algorithm.
That would be nice, man. That
But
would be
anyway,
nice.
yeah, that's so back to the point. I don't want, if that's the accurate history, I don't think that's going to set kids up for any kind of success. What I'd like to see more of is like, can we talk about, because there's plenty of real black figures. Like when I was a kid, I remember during Black History Month, I learned about George Washington Carver. I'm like, he is so awesome. Like I started reading books about him because I wanted to learn about him, and I'm a white kid.
Right.
It's like all these things he innovated with peanuts and stuff like that. All these, and then the story of Charles Drew, which is a tragedy, but he was a black doctor who developed the technology that allows us to give blood transfusions.
Right.
I was like, wow, this is a fantastic story. But like, you can do that, and then
the guy who was a janitor who watched a doctor experiment on doing heart surgery on babies in Johns Hopkins, and then ended up basically teaching that doctor how to do a technique that actually save these children's lives. And then that doctor, the white doctor, took credit for it for many years, but eventually he admitted, like, no, it was my janitor who fucking did it. You know what I mean? It was, and this guy's like in the halls of, he was made an honorary doctor. His picture is like with all of the greats of Johns Hopkins right now. Like, this guy is amazing. Like, there's so much history here we don't talk about, man. I'm sorry to cut you off, but that excited me because I remember watching his documentary.
But to me, like, isn't that more effective? Like, if you want to inspire black kids to get into science, teach them about George Washington Carver.
Yeah, soy milk, all the stuff that all those Starbucks barista, purple-haired liberals, oh, give me the soy milk and this. George Washington Carver, he's the one who gave you soy milk.
I think, didn't he make dynamite, or he figured out how to make explosives with peanuts? It's been a while since I read the book. I was a young boy when I read that stuff. But the thing is that I didn't care what color he was. I thought he was a cool scientist, and I was a nerd. So, but still, there's so many inspiring stories we could be telling. Why not do that? I guess this is the other thing is like, what is the need, the obsession with talking about the Tulsa Race Massacre? Are there any kids that are going to read about that and it's going to benefit their lives in some way? The only thing that I've ever found as a benefit for it is that when you're making the argument that, hey, maybe you shouldn't burn down your own neighborhoods, you point out that because the reason they think it's important is to say that apparently people of color would have all this wealth if they hadn't destroyed Black Wall Street. And then I go, that's interesting. So why is it again that you're burning down your own neighborhoods? And they get quiet and they get awkward because, it really kind of spits in the face of this whole narrative. I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about atrocities. I came out of my 80s education thinking Martin Luther King was a virtuous hero and hating racism and hating slavery. And, I guess what I'm getting at is just to say that I wish that we would focus more on trying to inspire these kids to embrace these ideas, to think these things are cool, to try to better themselves, and it inspired me, and I'm not even black. That's the point. I was like, so what is it going to do for an actual black kid? And that's what I wish that they would focus on more.
Yeah, I agree. So we're going to go back to the video, but before we do that, I get fixated on things. I guess it's just my personality. So just quickly, some of the inventions of George Washington Carver.
Let's do it.
Let me fill this up here. So first of all, he devised that cotton, in the South was depleting the soil. So he pretty much discovered that you have to plant certain plants there, one of them being peanuts, that reinfuses the soil with nitrogen so that you can cycle it. You do cotton this year, you do peanuts the next year, and it'll keep the soil enriched and keep it going. Yeah, so some of the things he did, not all of it was in peanuts. Some of it was feeding livestock. He developed plastics synthetic rubber, paper from soybeans, carbon vetted process for producing plants, paints and stains. And he has 3 separate patents, and that's all I can see from this clip here. So much more, but those are the things that like really popped out at me. And soy milk and things like that. This guy was a freaking genius, man.
Right.
Freaking genius, man. And black people did so much for this country. Like the filament, a black person was instrumental in the development of the filament that kept the Edison light bulb from burning out. Edison made the bulb, but it didn't last long because without the filament, it burned out very quickly. Light bulbs get very hot. It's that filament that an African American helped develop that made the Edison bulb viable, where it could now replace torch lanterns, which is what every street light had, was basically a gas lantern that burned all night. You know, like we are intricately a part of the development and the success of this country. And that's why I'm so passionate about these conversations, because we've lost our way. It seems like, it's not like we're not contributing still, but it seems like the media will only focus on if we're contributing towards twerking, pop culture stuff. There are black people, like I told the story of how I was downtown on Wall Street handling some business. And I saw this building, and I got to go look for that building again. It's right next to the Bull, one of these big-time trading companies. And I see the building. It's a nice all-black skyscraper. Because believe it or not, most of those buildings on there are black. Right. They don't want you to see what's going on inside because they're doing finance stuff. So they don't want you to be able to look through the windows and with a binocular and see what they're typing on their computers. Right? It's all secret squirrel shit in there, as they rape all of us for all of our money and give it to the rich people. Bottom line is, I picked this random building, something such in Brothers and Son. And I'm like, what is the history of this building? Because I'm a retard and I do shit like that from time to time. And when I look it up, it's a bunch of white guys, like most of those buildings down there, who started in like 18-0 in finance, and now they're descendants of multi-quadrillion years. Who's their CFO? A black woman.
Right.
Who's a fucking quadrillionaire herself. Never heard about her on TV. Never heard about articles about her. And I shouldn't have to, because she's a private citizen just working her career, living her life. But the point of me saying is that black people are doing it. Right. So many of us are doing it, but the media only focuses on the lower echelon, the smallest, the lowest denominator of our culture, the poor class. That's all they focus on. Right. So it makes it look like, oh, they're not doing anything. But no, you're only focusing on the dregs and the people who come out of it, who are the rappers and the athletes. As though that is the definition of black success, becoming a rapper and an athlete. When there's so many African Americans out there who are finished, especially black women, who are graduating from college, and they're like the highest, demographic and minorities that are graduating from college. Black women, not men, women.
Right.
Who are graduating with advanced degrees in science, health, finance, etc. And they're doing it, and nobody talks about people like that. But unless you have something to add, I want to go back to the video. Want to add anything?
Oh, just a couple other heroes that come to mind. The Tuskegee Airmen.
Absolutely.
Like the most badass, bomber assistant, bomber pilot, escort pilots of World War II. Mm-hmm. And like when they were going to do their final bombing raids, the guys who were basically running the bombers were told they could pick any escorts they wanted. They're like, you need to give us the Tuskegee Airmen because they'll keep us safe. And then Jesus, you said that you sang for the choir that was in Glory. It's such a fantastic movie, and Jesus, it makes me bawl like a kid to this day. That moment when Denzel character Trip is like grabbing the flag and screaming, "Come on!" because he knows if they stay on that hill that they're all gonna die. You know, because the white colonel has already killed himself trying to get them to go up the wall. Right. And I just the thing that I also liked about Glory was that it also kind of talked about the abolitionists. The white abolitionists had a lot to lose. Yeah. And they just kind of cease to exist in the current dynamic. Like they don't ever discuss that there were people that were part of that who also didn't agree with slavery, that were trying to end it. It's like that part. Where's that part of the history? Accurate history. Let's talk about Colonel Bernard Shaw. He didn't even have to go to that attack. He literally could have stayed behind. It was unusual for a colonel to be standing there next to the flag bearer at the entrance of a fort. That doesn't happen.
That's right.
But he did it because he knew that if he ironically, he knew if he got killed that the newspaper would finally cover what the 54th was doing. But
Right.
anyway, anyways, that was it. I just,
No, thank
inspiring
you.
stories.
Absolutely. $10 super chat from David S. He says, Thomas Sowell is a great mind. Thanks a lot for that $10 super chat. Thomas Sowell is a very interesting man. Absolutely. I watch a lot of his videos with everybody. There's some things I agree with. There's some things I don't. But he is a great man. He is somebody who should be a part of the conversation. I think too often we feel like we have to only glorify people that we 100% agree with. And that's just not the case, man. If we listen to Thomas Sowell's life, and his upbringing, he is an inspirational individual, and he has attained a lot of success. And I want to say one last thing about the rewriting of history. When you spoke about the white abolitionists, even like for some reason when you said that, Kanye came to mind, and he's talking about the Jewish community. And I feel like Kanye needs to be protected because I think he's a well-meaning person who's mentally ill, and I think that it's a little disgusting to me that they're attacking him the way they are, knowing that he's mentally ill. But to educate somebody like Kanye, one of the people who are at the forefront of fighting for Black people to have their rights in the 60s was white Jewish people. If you look at and white Christians as well, like Catholics and Protestants, specifically Protestants, really. If you look at these marches, you look at these black and white pictures, in the front, you're going to have clergy from the Jewish community, from the Protestant community, and even the Catholic community marching with Martin Luther King. You see, there were a lot of Jewish people and Protestants who were dying and being beaten alongside Black people, fighting for me to be able to have this conversation with you, V Radio. I think we need to get a true accounting of this history. We need to get a true account. We need to understand that the Underground Railroad, yes, Rosa Parks was it Rosa Parks? It's not Rosa Parks.
No, you're thinking of Harriet Tubman.
Harriet Tubman. I'm sorry. I know my history.
Don't allow me to presume to teach a Black man about his history or anything.
Stop white-splaining to me, damn it. How dare you white-splain to me Black history, even though I forgot that it was Harriet Tubman because of this Schaffenhauser beer. I'm drinking German beer. How dare me?
That's what it is. It's the Nazi beer you're drinking that's inhibiting your Black ability to read your own history.
Taking my Black card. Harriet Tubman led people on that Underground Railroad. But V Radio, who owned those houses, buddy? Who are risking their lives to hide these people in their basements and in their cellars and in their attics? Who had children in those homes where those racist, animalistic slave hunters, white slave hunters, would have killed those white people too? It was white people. They'd have killed them and their kids for hiding those slaves, to send a message to other white people, don't do it. So we've done this together. We have done this together since day one. We've sunk and we've risen and we've fallen and we've risen all together. Why is it in 2022 we got this group of people trying to tear us down? I don't know. You got anything from me?
And tear us apart, not just down, but apart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep,
absolutely.
That was it.
All right, let's go back to the video. This video been waiting here for us for a long time.
Often end up sending these people back into poor communities of color where they continue to prey on the weak. It's time to ask, are progressive pieties really enough to outweigh the thousands and thousands of victims of violent crime? Can we not both decry the murder of George Floyd and the drive-by shooting of his 4-year-old niece? Shouldn't the very thing that makes people, myself included, hesitant to talk about race and crime make us all the more anxious to defend its victims? Here to help me answer these really difficult questions is a brilliant, brilliant man, Wilfred Riley, assistant professor of political science at Kentucky State University and author of the books Taboo and Hate Crime Hoax. Welcome, Wilfred. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Batya. I hope I don't disappoint after that intro.
So your work focuses on exactly these questions, why there is a taboo on talking about these really important realities on the left. Walk us through the argument. What have you found in your research? Why is it so hard to talk about this?
Well, I think you covered a lot of this. I mean, so the reality of where crime occurs really isn't that much disputed. And I mean, you made this point already at great length. But I mean, when you talk about a quote unquote red state murder problem, the large majority of the murders in red states are concentrated in blue voting, heavily minority districts, and there are complex reasons for this. And I'll just say, as an African American man, part of this very bluntly, for a couple of reasons. I mean, past racism, we're much younger as a population, often decades younger, we're more urban. The African American crime rate overall is about 2.4 times the white crime rate. This isn't disputed. You can just go to the Bureau of Justice Statistics annual report, pull up that figure. So the main reason for the difference in crime between red and blue states is demographic. The majority of red states are in the South, where not only is there an honor culture, not only are there many poor white.
So just a quick point here that have you heard this absurd theory that the crime rates are identical? It's just that one of them is more over-policed. Have you heard that?
Well, I've heard the over police thing in general, but please expand.
Basically, they're suggesting that apparently the crime rate is identical, like, see, where I am here in this small country town, that it is in the ghetto. It's just that the ghetto is over policed. So they literally believe that it's the same amount of crime, and that the only reason that those communities have higher crime is because the police are out there, therefore catching more people committing crimes. Have you ever heard this nonsense? Because I've had this spit at me before.
I think I've heard that before. And so yeah, like you said, it's kind of like, well, they're finding this crime because there are more police there. But if you brought the same level of policing to the country, you would get the same amount of apprehension. It's just total bullshit, man.
Well, it's like if somebody commits a crime in a tree and nobody's there to arrest them, does it make a thud?
So like the crime that we all mostly care about, I mean, we care about all crime, but the ones that really touch the human consciousness is typically murder and rape, right? So where are the dead bodies that you guys in the suburbs and me in the suburbs that we're not complaining about? Like where are our loved ones that are disappearing that we're not calling the police for, that's not being counted on these crime statistics that people in the hood are deciding to call the police for? And because they have so many cops in their jurisdiction, they're able to find. Doesn't make any sense. Murder is murder. If somebody dies, it's going to get reported, and we're going to know that that person is dead. So it's just a lie. It's just more of a lie that ignorant, unintelligent people believe. And when I say ignorant, unintelligent, I'm not trying to insult. It's a fact. If you have an 11th grade education and you didn't finish school, you didn't get a GED, and you also don't have a college degree, it's not necessary, but you don't have one, you barely or you didn't finish high school, and you don't have an advanced or secondary degree or trade, you're more likely to believe these things because you typically do not understand how statistics work. So I'll tell you what I have heard, V, is how can you trust those numbers when those numbers are coming from a racist, segregationist, historically treacherous to black people government?
Right.
So how can we even have a conversation, V, if you don't even believe that the statistics are even real?
Right. It's terrible. But I guess it brings me back to a conversation that I had with a black police officer at Occupy. And I said to him, what are your feelings on racism in the police force? He's like, well, I did join the police force because I wanted to try to be part of the solution. And, I was concerned that there'd be a lot of racism. And I said, so what happened? He's like, well, then I started arresting a lot of black people, which was like, he wasn't hurting his own people with this. It was just as that he kind of came to a realization that unfortunately there is a huge crime rate among his people. And it really started to wake him up. And while obviously he's not racist, he's a black man, but he thinks that a lot of the community just does not want to face the fact that there is a problem in their culture. But we've talked about that.
Right. Absolutely. 1,000%. Jump back in.
Let's do it.
Latino Americans, many groups struggling with crime, but you also just have a much larger black population percentage, and adjusting for that younger, more urban community, that closes the gap almost entirely. In fact, in the one crude model I've run on this, it reverses it. So this argument that just sort of standard Republican areas, North Dakota, are going to be very violent, is whether you like the pachyderms or not, that's just not accurate. And I think most people at some level know that's not accurate. That New York is more dangerous than North Dakota. Why is it taboo to talk about this? Because I think of the incredible taboo against saying anything that could be construed as quote unquote blaming the victim on the left. I mean, it's simply obvious that whether you're talking about working class Appalachian communities, which are all around me in Kentucky, which has quite a high crime rate, or you're talking about the hood, bluntly, inner city black communities, there are cultural, situational reasons for all this crime. But saying this isn't a result of contemporary racism, that's very taboo on the left. Many of my progressive friends, even in academia, have trouble expressing that. But the simple reality is that when you don't talk about that, when you don't talk about the reality that good, integrated police forces reduce crime, a lot of people die. And that's what we're seeing now. And that's why we're seeing this incredible, 720-degree triple axel pirouette from the people on the political left, like Hochul, who'd been at least nodding along with defund the police until recently, back toward sort of a tough on crime attitude. But we'll see how close they get to actually discussing the real issues here. The red state murder problem, quote unquote, is not the issue.
I think there are a couple issues here we're all kind of hitting at. One being, as you just kind of mentioned, the age discrimination of so much crime in our cities and other places. We're talking about people, broadly speaking, between the ages of 15 and 30, a lot of them teenagers, a lot of them being failed by kind of social structures, after school programs, not having communities, church, things that in another generation would have brought, at-risk youth back from the brink. That being one issue, and then another being, as far as I can tell, an extraordinary mental illness problem, or mentally ill people, living in the streets, not being treated and engaging in violence, who should be, even if it's not going to be captured by the criminal justice system, then by a mental health facility or something like that. Are those two categories getting worse? Are we doing less now to deal with those two categories of crime that from what I can tell, make up a large proportion of the rise in crime that we're seeing?
I think so. I think there's another elephant in the room here, though, which is the recent post-George Floyd, quote-unquote, defund the police movement. I mean, during kind of the Black Lives Matter era, we've seen, and the most reliable crime data is on murder, so let's talk murder. We've seen an incredible surge in American homicides. So murders have gone from 14,194 in 2014, when the Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin protest period really began, to about 21,000 today. And we see a particular spike in murders, which took us over 20,000 just after Mr. Floyd was killed, murdered, I think we've all said, frankly, in early 2020. So the reason, there's actually sort of a causal mechanism, as we would say here. I mean, myself, Bob Moranto, and Pat Wolf at the University of Arkansas actually wrote an academic paper looking at this. And one of the things you find is that police stops, regular broken window style interactions with the citizenry, those dropped by about 40% across at least those major cities we were able to measure, starting at this time, starting in May, June of 2020. And since then, you've seen a 44% increase in homicides. I mean, the graphs track almost perfectly. So I think we've all...
So basically what this guy is saying is, after George Floyd, Black people just started dying like crazy due to violence. Like, this is when everything really started, like George Floyd. What do you think about that?
I don't think it helped. Because you have to remember, I would say that's kind of like a turning point when suddenly crime became something you're doing that's a noble cause. Like, that's when you end up with these situations like we're going to glorify looters and rioters and violence as if it's somehow you're doing something that's literally going to make anything better for your people. Like, then they would reframe it as something like an uprising. That's what I was bringing up that Ben Shapiro debate with Black Lives Matter. The Black Lives Matter people referred to them as uprisings, as if it was a revolution. Or I was like, it's not a revolution. Territory is not being taken.
There's some places territory was taken.
Well, but as in like,
Chaz.
oh, well, right, Chaz Chop, that went beautifully. It's funny
Tons
that
of
just
black
came
people
up.
got killed.
Well, right. Actually, I know, unfortunately, he passed away, but I know somebody who was streaming that through that entire thing. And I had to bring up his video because somebody was arguing about that incident on Twitter. But yeah, they killed a black man and they wounded his teenage son. Like
Yeah.
it was a misidentification. But, got to remember, we got to let them do their own policing. Community policing will be so much better if we just let those people walk around. And Jesus, they had like AR-15s. Their cops are just patrolling with AR-15s. That was the Chaz cops, But it basically it didn't help only because of the fact that we changed the way that we do things in activism. So like, I go back to Occupy again. Occupy was strictly Martin Luther King nonviolent, and there were two factions that were trying to make it violent. That was Antifa, and then a group called BAM, by any means necessary. And when I was passing a resolution to make it abundantly clear that the Michigan chapters of Occupy did not condone violence in any way, those people tried to stop me. They failed because I'm a better politician than they are, but they wanted it to be part of our policy to be violent. And again, we've kind of created a situation also where what is it? The criminals are the victims now, right? Like Daryl Brooks, the victim. Like Black Lives Matter was trying to bail that guy out. The stuff like that. I'm just like, what the heck is the deal here? Like, and they're like, and we've discussed this before. Their victims cease to exist. Like nobody that guy killed apparently exists. There's so many other examples of very similar. Like, you remember that case where that unfortunate black male individual tied up an old woman in her house and stabbed her 22 times, and then they went through the trial, and then the jurors would not convict him of murder because he was a black male. There were 3 of them that would not. And then
Oh shit, I think I remembered that. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. So then they finish it, and because the 3 activist jurors would not convict him, they had to go with like some other lesser version of murder, basically. And one of the jurors was like, "No, I'm not doing this." So like when they're asking everybody,
Yeah, it was a white woman that was like, "Nah, this is not happening."
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the point is that then they threatened her. They were like, "If I catch you on the street, I'm going to beat you up." Like,
yeah.
How guilty do you need to be? He had DNA evidence. It was so obvious, and so the point is just to say that the attitude is to suggest that somehow somebody like that is the victim in the situation. And I'm not saying that people can't be victims, because again, we've talked about this. There's a symbiotic relationship between the poverty and the crime. But when we get to a point that you can't even talk about certain criminals, those criminals disappear. Like we talked about not the Buffalo shooter, the New York City subway shooter who just ceased to exist, who is a black supremacist, but he doesn't fit the narrative. So they needed to just kind of like make him go away, And that was the part about it where if it becomes no longer reflective of reality, where we need to hide the truth about something, I don't know necessarily that is actually improving our understanding of it. Like,
right.
It would seem to be the opposite.
I don't know, man. I don't know, but I tell you, it's really hard for us to have that conversation when we have so much hate from within. I'm telling you, man. Nobody knows how difficult it is as a black man to try and speak on these things because you care about black lives when you have so many black people who think it's a joke. Really.
Right.
And you'll see a lot of that in the comments section. It's like they think that it's a game because they don't have to see dead black bodies like I do every day.
Right.
You know who you are. These folks wake up every day, especially the black elite who have nice jobs and they live in nice communities. They don't have to see this. Maybe they grew up in those bad communities 30, 40, 50 years ago. But they're not there right now watching all these beautiful black bodies dead in the streets every goddamn day. And they think it's a fucking joke, and it's not a goddamn joke.
Right.
It's not a joke. And it's depressing and it's despicable because this is the only community that will make light of a genocide of its own people. Look what happened to Kanye. Kanye spoke about the Jewish community, and look what's happening to him.
Right.
Look how they're galvanizing together to say that's not acceptable. We're not going to accept it. You're going to pay. Every other community can come together and make change for each other, but the black community. When a black man stands up and says, this is wrong, this is happening, we need to change, we got these black folks in our community who will stymie that type of progress and laugh at it. And it's depressing, man. I don't want to go no further with it because you guys know sometimes I go crazy on the comment sections. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. It is what it is. I can't change the world by myself, but at least I'm trying, which is more than what half you folks are doing.
Right.
Because I'm talking to V Radio and I'm talking to all these other folks. And to be honest, V Radio, this is not really your problem because, like the statistics show, if you come to New York, 5.8% of white people get killed in New York and 67% of black people dying.
Right.
New York is like the safest place in the world for white people. For black people, is genocide, man. And you got black folks willing to play games and act like this is a fucking game. That's terrible, man. I'm sorry. I'm getting emotional.
No, you're fine, man. It's a good thing to get emotional about. You know, I did a meme once because it was a panel that they put together on MSNBC to bitch about Kyle Rittenhouse. And it was, of course, an all-black panel, you know, because it's Joy Reid.
One more thing. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I'm only going to address you one last time here, lady, because you're pissing me off tonight. I love you. You've been with the show for a long time, but you pissing me the fuck off. She says, I am the elite. I'm not the fucking elite if I make a goddamn living dealing with these dead bodies every goddamn day. That's not an elite job. I'm more in the community than you will ever be in the community. Whatever you did in the community is years ago. You ain't there no more. And unless you do my job where you have to go see black mothers, black brothers, black sisters crying because their son is dead with a bullet in their head, don't talk to me. This bullshit. I'm getting emotional. I'm getting upset because this is what we have to deal with. These folks who think it's a game. It's not a game. It's not a game. Anyway, I keep going. Go ahead.
You think he's motivated by hating you, A-Lady? That's what you think is upsetting him, is that he hates you. Do you realize how absolutely backwards and ridiculous that is? This whole conversation has been about how to actually make things better for the people who live in these communities. That's not a subject of hate. If anybody hates, it would be the people living in a gated community, you know, with their own private security while calling for defund the police, sitting on millions of dollars, you know, and then when confronted about it, giving the excuse, well, this isn't my money, it's my family's money, which is why I'm paying it out to my other wealthy people. If I had to give up anybody, it's like, so far as who's hating who, it certainly wouldn't be an African-American police officer. We need a hell of a lot more of them. You want to improve anybody's life. I think A-Lady is just kind of addicted to her victim complex, and she needs to have enemies, which is why she's been
the funny thing is, though, like, if you have a conversation with the lady, and I certainly have,
right?
She's a very intelligent person. And she is a very kind person, but it's like when she's behind this keyboard, she suffers from what we see so many other people suffer. Like, it's like they disassociate themselves from who they really are. Or at least we don't know who they really are. Maybe this is who they really are. But this is not the type of conversation you would have if the A-Lady was on this show right now and called in. She would not talk like that. She says, I like to beat up black people. I'm a community officer. I've gotten awards for talking people down. 3 weeks ago, I saved a black guy from jumping off of a bridge. On everything. God.
Must be because you hate them, right?
I hate them.
And it's just, but to her, she doesn't realize she's talking to another human being.
Every other day, we got like regulars. Like, I'm arresting black men who are beating up black women. Domestic violence.
Must be because you hate them.
Because I hate them.
Right.
Every single year, I arrange for hundreds of turkeys. I've aligned myself with local organizations and corporations in the community who donate hundreds of turkeys to who, V Radio?
People of color.
People of color.
Right.
Then a month later, same organizations, thousands of toys, hundreds of turkeys, but thousands of toys and clothing to who?
People of color.
I don't get paid extra for that. This is crazy, man. This is absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. I got rental properties, and I only rent to people of color who are on public assistance.
Wow.
This is from the guy who 15 years ago lived in the projects. 15 years ago, that's it. Lived in the projects. Going to housing court because I can't make my rent.
It sounds to me like, especially like there was the one point I was going to make earlier was just about how all these pundits that were on that panel were all millionaires. It's like, so yeah, of course they understand the struggle, right? But also just that people don't understand what cops go through either. I remember watching Cops Too Hot for TV. Used to be a VHS tape that you could pick up. And of course, it's meant to shock you. It's got a lot of dirty stuff on it, or just not necessarily dirty, but bad stuff. But there's a scene at the end where there's this cop. He has to go into this house where this guy went crazy and killed his entire family, including his little baby in the crib. And, as he's walking out, is you want to know why cops kill themselves? Like, this is why. Stuff like this.
Yeah.
And because it's the average citizen, cops are, you pulled me over and gave me a ticket. Like, they don't, it's like you're here, you're irritating me, you're irritating my life or whatever. And that's why I tell people that before they're going to open their mouths about police officers, just sit and watch police activity for about an hour. You'll figure it out. Like that poor guy we watched who had to shoot that dude who was coming at him with the knives.
Yeah.
And like he just fell apart. It's like they don't understand it and they're not going to. And just the funny thing is I wanted to be a cop, and then I met my ex-wife and I was like, okay, maybe not. But anyway, my point was just to say that there are a lot of very wealthy elite people on MSNBC. They're making an awful lot of money on pushing this rhetoric. And it was astounding to me to think that like there's this guy's got wild hair. And he's a professor. His net worth was like 17 million. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure he knows the struggle.
That guy. I think I know who you're talking about.
He is the most racist dude I have ever seen put on MSNBC.
I didn't know he was worth that much money. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, he's extremely wealthy. He was the wealthiest person on the whole panel. The poorest was Al Sharpton. For some reason, his net worth was only $500,000. But
because he owes all that damn tax money.
Right.
He owes so much, tens of millions in taxes that his MSNBC check just goes straight to Uncle Sam, man.
Right.
Jesus Christ. I would have expected him to be. He has had historically serious tax issues. So,
well, it's the same problem though with any other super elite. Like, he could change so many people's lives if he donated 1 million of that to Pastor Corey Brooks in Chicago.
Right.
Like, if he really cared, what the hell is he doing talking on MSNBC? Why don't you go do something? I don't know. Maybe it's because I grew up poor, but the first thing I think of doing if I had money was figuring out ways to change people's lives. Maybe it's just the way I was raised, but
right. But they don't care. They absolutely don't care. We got a couple more minutes left on this video. Let's finish it out, and then we'll get the hell out of here.
Yep.
Approaching the 2-hour mark. Let me bring it in now.
Always failed poor kids to some extent. I don't mean to be sarcastic about that, but I think there's something else that's going on right now. And mental illness, yeah, that's a big part of this. I mean, when you look at the homelessness issue in cities like Portland or my hometown of Chicago, I don't think this is going to be resolved just with the assignment of housing. I mean, you're talking about many long-term drug problems. Mm-hmm. You're talking about people who are homeless, in many cases traveling to places like the West Coast to be homeless there. But you have an intersection of these issues because at the same time mental illness is growing. At the same time, both the left and the right, for different reasons, don't want to address homelessness. You're also seeing depolicing. So, I mean, the plain fact is you had loitering and vagrancy laws in most cities until the modern era, the 70s, the 80s, that were pretty rigorously enforced. So it's not actually as though there's no way to clear up an encampment of 800 tents that's across the street from the city courthouse in, say, Portland. The problem is that there's a lack of the main, if you will, the will to do that. And I think as people get tired of stepping around needles and dodging muggers and so on in major cities, we're going to see that will come back. And if the Democrats are not willing to commit to doing that, I think you're going to see a lot more Republicans elected in urban areas than you otherwise would have. So yeah, your points are very good ones, but I also think that just the lack of cops is the big factor there. That 40% drop and that 40% rise, those aren't coincidences.
Well, can I ask you, there is, of course, a racist way to talk about this. Breitbart used to have a tag for black on black crime. Like, that's obviously a racist way to address what is an important topic. What would you say to leftists, progressives, people like me who care so much about this, but feel really uncomfortable talking about it, feel like, the people who have brought this up because the left won't end up being people who you really don't want to be in the same company as, how would you tell people like why it's important to care about this and how to talk about it?
Well, that's a great question. And the answer is because facts matter. And if you don't address real facts, you end up chasing ghosts while people die. I mean, so I will say one thing about the Breitbart black on black crime tab. I mean, to some extent, that was a joke. What they were doing was saying that the media was focusing so intently on these rare outlier cases. I mean, police brutality, whites murdering black people, so on down the line, that they were ignoring this graphic reality of street violence in the city. So without defending Breitbart, really, I mean, they weren't posting black on white crimes. They were just saying over and over again, look, here's a tax-paying citizen that was killed. And I mean, this is a reality. I mean, in my book, Taboo, I look at actual patterns of interracial crime because in the American upper middle class, again, for 2 or 3 years, we heard about Barbecue Becky and Pool Party Paula, more seriously, Dylan Roof, just constant Caucasian attacks on black people. So we take a look at the actual data there. And what I find is, first of all, violent crime involving whites and blacks, i.e. a black attacker or a white attacker, is about 3% of all serious index crime. I mean, the year I looked, there were 20 million crimes. Only 600,000 fit that very specific bill. But more to the point, interracial crime was also 80% black on white. So there's this simple refusal, as you mentioned, on the part of a lot of well-intentioned progressives to look at the reality, to look at the data. And that's why the right-wing media started mocking that. But in terms of how to address it, I guess my simple point is facts aren't racist. If you look at something, even the margins, if either VDare or Jacobin says something, that might not be who you're going to cite in your academic article. But if you look that up and it turns out to be real, and it turns out there is a crime problem in whatever community, I've mentioned poor white communities, Latino communities as well, it's foolish to pretend that that's not real. It's foolish to pretend that the real issue in America is sort of upper middle class whites abusing black people when you're looking at these murder numbers.
Well, Professor, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
I mean,
Man, that last line.
Yeah. It's like a truth bomb just dropped on us. Like, basically, he said what I just said. Like, you can't refute the data. I said it in the chat. Numbers aren't racist.
Right.
It is what it is. But unfortunately, some people just don't want to believe the numbers. They so don't believe in a system. In many instances, a system that has made them wealthy, a system that has afforded them opportunities that probably nobody else in the world have opportunities for, because there are real poor elsewhere. There are real ethnic minorities elsewhere that get treated like crap. You go to India and they're all Indians, but they have a caste system. They literally have a caste system. You know, one of the biggest issues in India right now is rape and people taking advantage of their lower caste employees, sexually harassing them, sexually abusing them, because they're not viewed as they're even human, really. The untouchables. Right. Like if we can't even get these folks to believe the numbers, V, how are we supposed to have a conversation? How are we supposed to change things if there's a segment of our population that says, I don't even trust the numbers?
Or rather, you get into these arguments where no source is ever good enough. Like, one of the things that I spend the most amount of time on my videos doing is looking for sources that they can't possibly just wave off. And man, that takes a long time. Like, can't use a Fox News clip, even if they're telling the truth. Can't do that. You can't, it depends on who you're talking to, of course. Can't use an MSNBC clip. Can't, not that I really like using mainstream media anyway, but like, they don't want to accept it, and then they'll make up things. So like, let's say we do those statistics, then they'll just make up conspiracy theories. Oh, well, it must be the racist FBI. That's the reason those statistics say that. They don't have any evidence of that. They just can wave it off like that anytime they want. And the thing that bothers me about it is that it's like you said, until we're getting real about it, what it's not going to change. We have to continue to just keep plugging away the way we are. We have to keep telling the truth. And I do believe that there is a movement within like society now that is starting to reject this excessive level of nonsense that we're supposed to be trying to embrace as truth. I think people are starting to get it. But we're going to have to keep fighting it because there are too many people who have a vested interest in getting us to fight each other irrationally. But that's what we do. That's why we're doing this. That's why we do these channels, and I hope we can continue to get a bigger audience for that purpose.
Right. Absolutely. And just to really drum it down for people, nobody's saying that white people don't commit crimes. Nobody's saying that white people don't murder, rape, maim, serial kill, school shooter, none of that things. What we're saying, is specifically what I'm saying, and I like to speak for myself, if he can speak for himself,
Sure.
is that the issue is that 13% of the population of America, hard numbers, not percentage wise, hard numbers, real numbers, 13% of the population commits more murders than any other demographic, race, whatever you want to call it, in America. All right. The majority race in America is Caucasian people. They kill each other less than black people, who encompass 13% of the population. That's a problem. That is what I call self-genocide. And that's why I come on this channel and I talk about it. I talk about it days in, days out. Why? Not because I'm trying to embarrass the black community, because I want us to wake up and start having the conversations that will save our children. Simple conversations like stop embracing rap music. We could still rap if we want, it's ours, but change the topics. Stop talking about drugs. Stop talking about marginalizing our women. Like one of the biggest proponents in the chat right now is a female. I want our young black men to stop talking about women like they're objects, to stop talking about women like they don't matter. So I want to actually benefit you. Right. I want us to have God in our families, not because I'm a religious zealot, but you got to believe in something. Otherwise, you're not being held accountable to anything, and you believe in nothing. So I want black men to stay in the household and help the women that they make children with and raise those children with morals. I want black men to stop abandoning black women. That's all I'm asking for. These are the things I think we need to talk about, because these are the things that raise good citizens. These are the things that give people the values not to go out there and murder somebody because they pissed you off.
Right.
Because they belittled your manhood. Go ahead, B.
So recently, somebody tried to debate me on my channel, specifically about the video that I did, wherein I mentioned it was actually the one where science proves that if you attack an in-group, that you'll create a retaliatory response, which is the reason why racism is surging. So one of the things he took issue with was that I read some statistics from Statista that showed that for whatever reason, Caucasians were the second most represented among victims of hate crime overall. And he argued with me that we have to look at per capita, and I was like, okay, well, first of all, I didn't say that black people weren't the top, because they are. And the funny thing is what he ended up doing, because he's in my Discord, and a lot of my Discord guys helped me with my research, is that one of them said, well, here, let's look at the statistics then. If per capita is so important to you, here's what you're going to find. Yes, black people are per capita the most, disproportionately the victims of hate crime. But they also are disproportionately the actual offenders of hate crime. So both of those things are true. And that was kind of mind-blowing to me because, you know, it to me, it concerns me because it means that not only are we taking away everything that the civil rights movement achieved, we're infecting people of color with racism on top of it. And then we're telling them that they can't be racist. So what does that do? Well, you know, what did the worst, well, the best thing the devil ever did was convince everybody that he doesn't exist. And that's how you end up with videos like that one for my my video about the truth about racism between Asians and blacks. Was this Black Lives Matter activist following this Asian cop around, calling him the CH, you know, Asian slur over and over and over again, like literally like 60 times. And then finally, ironically, it's a white guy riding by on his bike, like going, "Hey, man, don't do that. That's wrong. That's racist." And how does this guy defend himself from saying that word? Black people can't be racist. So, you know, it's like, it seems to me, you know, that I think, you know, we had a great conversation tonight and we kind of went over a lot of these things kind of in depth, you know, and it's interesting is that, you know, I'm not allowed to have this conversation. I just do it anyway. So, but there was one more thing I wanted to say. I'm part of a wrestling team that I drive like an hour out of my way to take my son to, that he's the only white kid on. And it's to participate in with the other coaches to mentor these children and get them to be good citizens and to give them an alternative to things going on in the streets. And so my friend, who's the head coach of the team, he has 2 children. He is still with his wife. And he had a violent past when he was younger, but he totally overthrew it. He's like completely reformed himself. And all of his children are going to private schools on academic scholarships.
That's awesome, man. That's
It's
real
fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I was like, this is so beautiful. I'm like, you are awesome, dude. I don't know how you did it, but like same thing. And that was just, and we're talking about academic scholarships for private high schools. His daughter is in college on an academic scholarship right now.
Oh, wow.
So
That's beautiful.
what are they doing right? And why can't everybody else in the ghetto do it? Because my friend did it.
Yeah. It's you know, I don't know the secret sauce, but I can tell you he's in his kids' lives. You know, he's in his kids' lives. You know, and that's one of the biggest things. 2-parent home, and when I say that, it's not that every home has to stay together. Sometimes you got to go. You know, you're abusing each other. You just don't love each other, whatever. But you're still in your kid's life. You're still there. You're still spending time with them. You're still giving them the support that they need to be good citizens. But this is a conversation that we need, man. And unfortunately, people are afraid to have it. But I'm so happy that you are brave enough to come on this show and have this conversation with me, V. I think it's time for us to wrap it up, my brother. Any last words?
Go to hy.page/vradio and check me out on all of my mediums. We actually simulcasted over to Odyssey. There weren't very many viewers over there, but I wanted to test out the system today. I'm currently banned for a week for nothing, essentially. So I'm going to start migrating over to these other platforms, and I'm not going to go away. Like, I'll be on YouTube until they stop, but my plan is to get my followers to all head over. Like, we were playing around with Odyssey today. You can actually like post pictures in the Odyssey chat. Like, it's actually really fun. There was all kinds of little things we learned. They've come a long way. I'll be on Rumble too. I don't know what's going on with Rumble because the algorithm there is terrible. Like, I don't know what it is. I get like 3 views on Rumble. No idea why. But anyway, you know, check out my content. I just did a bunch of great streams. That's, I think, part of the reason. It's the only thing I noticed is that when I start to get momentum, because like I've got $350 in super chats right now. That's never happened. So that I get that momentum. And then I also started to get subscribers again. And all of a sudden I get this obscure strike out of nowhere. And it's almost like they're just trying to keep me stuck at 4,800 where I've been for like the last 7 months. You know, but check it out. And, you know, again, thanks for having me on, man. And,
Absolutely.
It's always great to talk to you. And I definitely feel like, you know, I'm glad that I met you, ironically, because you were watching one of my videos.
Yeah. I actually used one of your videos in my video. That
Right.
was
And
awesome.
remember, you always have full permission to do that, and you can watch the whole thing. I don't care. At the end of the day, I don't make my money from YouTube really off of the monetization anyway, because 90% of what I do doesn't get monetized because
Right.
it's too. But I get it from super chats or from supporters. So you can play anything of mine, because the reality is that you're not taking any money from me by playing my video. If you send
Right.
people in my direction, it just helps. So,
Appreciate
and
you,
that's
man.
how I think we ended up sharing our audience. You have a lot of mine and I have a lot of yours. So
Yeah,
thanks.
absolutely. Absolutely. And that's how we grow organically, man. You got to have allies, like-minded people, people who are just looking for truth and justice, not like-minded politically, just like-minded in that we are open-minded and we are looking for truth and justice, man. And I appreciate you, V Radio. Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate you for coming through. V, I'm gonna let you go because I'm gonna wrap it up my damn self.
You got it. Take care, brother.
All right, man. Take it easy. Peace. All right, man. That was V Radio. It's always a pleasure having V Radio. V Radio is a really good friend of the show, very intelligent guy. You know, like me, he has a story, and I love the fact that he has credibility when he talks because he grew up, in less than stellar circumstances, and he has seen both ends of the spectrum, and I love that. And he's an intelligent guy, and this guy is not a guy who's conservative. This is a guy who was in Occupy Wall Street. This guy supported candidates like Bernie Sanders, and it's very similar to me. We're not conservative people. We're just looking at the data. We're looking at the numbers, and we're saying, hey, we got a problem here, man. So it was great having him on the show. For everybody who's new to the channel, you see me sparring with people inside of the chat. That's what I do from time to time. I used to do it a whole lot more in the beginning of the show. I kind of have tried to focus more on the content instead of getting sidetracked and arguing with people in the chat. A lot of people miss that about me. They love the engagement I used to do, where I'd start off with a topic on the show and end up just having conversations with the chat or whatever. It's all love. Even A Lady said it. She said people don't understand the love we have for each other. I disagree with A Lady on a lot of things, but I appreciate the support that she brings to the channel. I think sometimes she's purposely being a rabble rouser, but that's not for me to judge. It's her personal business what she wants to do on the YouTube. But I've spoken to A Lady, and she's a very intelligent person, and she's actually a very kind person. So hey, I will keep looking at her like that until she really proves me differently. But it's not personal, guys. Like if you come on a Strategic Eyes show and you say something I don't like, I'm gonna call you out. And if you want to rebuttal, I'm gonna post what you rebuttal, and we're gonna have a discussion about it. But it's never personal. We're adults. We can disagree on things and still move on, and still see you on the next show. It's never personal. We don't ban people unless you're spamming our comment section or unless you're saying overtly racist or evil things. All right. Other than that, you can say whatever the hell you want. We're pretty much good to go. Um, Lots of people in the chat. I know I didn't get to really shout people out because I had a guest today, and I'm not going to do that now because it's going to take 1,000 years. But big shout out to David S for all of the super chats that he gave the channel. We appreciate you. Like V said, he said something very interesting. He said that his channel was on the verge of growing again, and then he got a strike. That kind of happened to me too, and I think it's something that they definitely do, because my channel has been growing very slowly, but it has grown, and we're now at over 7,000 subscribers. But I was adding subscribers at a very fast clip, and my lives were averaging 30 to 40 people. And then I got banned, and now I'm back down to where I'm at now, where we're averaging between 18 and 25 people. We had actually bettered that average. Like at the end of a live, I would have had like 150 views before I got banned. Now at the end of my lives, I have 50 or 60 views. YouTube is purposely trying to hold channels like mine and V Radio down. I proved it to you guys when I did a video where I simply said, hey guys, for the first time in my life, I'm going to vote Republican for 2 candidates only. Not a Republican, I'm just voting for 2 candidates only because I think that they personify my views and they're going to represent me, my interests, if they take office. That's all I said in the video. And I showed you guys in my live and in the community tabs where I showed you screenshots. YouTube demonetized that video. They said it's not suitable for advertisers. Well, how the hell is me saying, hey, I'm going to vote Republican, and not say anything negative about any marginalized groups. Said no hate speech, no curses, no nothing, no commercials, no nothing. I just said, hey, I'm going to vote Republican for these two candidates because I believe in law and order, and these guys are going to, do something about all the rampant crime in my state. That's all I said. And they demonetized the video. They literally demonetized the video, and I showed you the proof, so I'm not talking crap. Because a lot of times YouTubers will come and complain about things that's not really happening. I showed you the proof. So if I don't know what other proof you need to see that shows like mine are not getting the attention that it deserves, that they're not showing it to people. And the funny thing about YouTube is they don't care about little guys like me. So in my analytics section, they show me what they're doing. They show me that they don't show the video to people. They don't show it to other shows. They'll put my video under like these obscure YouTubers as a commercial, like like the end of your video. If you don't have your video set up to show the videos you want people to see, at the end of people's videos, their suggested videos, you'd be surprised on they'll tell me what videos they're suggesting my video from, and it has nothing to do with the topics I talk about. It has nothing to do with law enforcement. It has nothing to do with politics. It has nothing to do with race relations. They recommend my video to demographics that are not interested in my topics. So that's another way of them holding the channel down. If they would recommend my video after a TYT video, I would get viewers, because some people who don't believe in TYT or who do would want to hear my perspective. If they recommended my video after a Officer Tatum video or a donut operator video, these are former law enforcement people, I would get some views. But they recommend my video after, I don't even like, how to bake cookies, and I don't know, like the world's longest bridge. Like nobody's watching those videos and then gonna say, let me click this strategic eyes guy so I can hear him talk about true crime, somebody getting murdered, or race relations or police and stuff. That's their little tricks of holding channels like mine's down. That's it. So that's why myself and people like V Radio, we ask for you to support us. We ask for the super chats, we ask for the memberships, we ask for the Patreons and all that stuff, because without you, these shows can't survive. They can't. Over 1,000 videos, over 7,000 subscribers, and every day I might get between 2 and 3 subscribers. 2 and 3 new subscribers. That's YouTube. They're doing that. They're doing it. They're doing it. It is what it is. What's another thing? Just I'm doing a little housekeeping before I let you guys go. We are on Rumble, but like V Radio said, something's wrong with the algorithm. So Rumble is really hard to build an audience. The audience is kind of starting to build on Rumble. I think I have like 50 or 60 subscribers. So if you want to go over to Rumble, I'm going to look into Odyssey. When I first looked at Odyssey, it was when they first started up, and it was definitely not ready for prime time. So I did not sign up with Odyssey, but I will consider looking at Odyssey again, because it sounds like they definitely got their ship together and they're putting out a good product. So maybe we'll start streaming on Odyssey as well. We also are on Facebook, and we do stream to Facebook. So if you want to watch us on your Facebook page, you can watch pretty much all of my live streams while they're happening on Facebook, and you can comment, and your comment will come to the main show, and I can actually read out your comment from Facebook as I'm streaming. We also stream to Twitch, so consider joining the Twitch channel. And I have an Instagram and I have a Twitter. And we actually live stream to Twitter now as well. We've just added that like 2-3 lives ago. So we're live streaming on Twitter as well. So all of these different venues is all Strategic Eyes. It's either the Strategic Eyes show or Strategic Eyes. And if you put Strategic Eyes in their search engine, you'll get my channel. So find me on these social networks and make sure that you join the channel and you support me. And it is what it is, man. I'm here. I'm trying my best to help. And I hope people understand I do it out of love. I see horror in my job. Horror. I see things that human beings should not see on a regular basis. And unfortunately, a lot of that mayhem, the victims are Black. And it's to me, it's impossible to see that and not want to help. and not want to speak out against it. Because the people who are controlling the narrative, they don't see that every day. They're not exposed to that. And therefore, it's not something that they have to talk about. They can pretend like it doesn't exist because they don't confront it every day. I guarantee you, if the activists that have the platforms right now, if they had to do what I do and see all these victims, even not even be a cop, you could be an EMS worker and you could work in the hood. They probably see even more because I don't go to every job. It's impossible. But the EMS workers typically do. They go from the scene to the hospital and back to the scene again to the hospital. How many of those victims do those EMS workers see? If these activists would see that, they would be fighting for things that actually help the Black community. These politicians are not serving you if you're Black. And we're going to have to find a way around it. And that's all I'm trying to do. I'm trying to talk about what won't be spoken about. It's like the violence that's inside the Black community, the culture of violence, it's almost like Harry Potter, like Voldemort, like he whose name shall not be said. Nobody wants to talk about it. But if you don't want to talk about it, how the hell can it be fixed? And it's kind of like Harry Potter, right? I know that's kind of like a really lame example, but nobody wanted to act like Voldemort was coming back. And guess what? He just kept growing strength, plotting and scheming until in the later movies, they had no choice but to deal with him, and it was almost too late. Well, that's what's happening. So many beautiful Black people are dying from a race of people that has proven to each and every single one of you, Black, white, Asian, Latino, whoever's watching this video, we have proven that we're creative, we're innovative, and we are survivors. We've proven that. We have proven that to America. And understand, every single Black child that dies is a child who could potentially have solved something, created something beautiful that touched people's souls, or invented something that could change humankind's life. I'm not saying other races are not capable of that. It's okay to be proud of your people. It's okay to be white and be proud to be white. It's okay to be Black and be proud to be Black. I'm a Black man. I'm proud to be Black. And I'm telling you that history has shown that Black people can contribute, have contributed, and continue to contribute to this day. But for some strange reason, the media is not covering those contributions. And we have a big problem of violence in inner city, poor African American communities. A problem that does not exist in middle class African American communities, does not exist in rich African American communities, doesn't even exist that much in upper poor class African American communities. It exists in the poorest of the poor African American communities. And in those communities where there are a lot of Black people, because a good proportion of African Americans are in poverty, they're dying. They're dying. And we're not getting a chance for those generations to leave poverty and contribute to America because they're dying. And I'll leave you with this last thing because I don't want to go on and on because I think I've ranted for quite a while now. It's not just the gangsters and the thugs who are dying. It's innocent people. Look at the videos. Look how these thugs shoot. They don't aim. They're not on the range. They're not looking like cops like this. They're killing little kids. They're killing girls. They're killing little boys. They're killing toddlers, adolescents, prepubescent teens. We don't know what those kids are going to do. If you kill like a gangster who's 17 or 18, it's a tragedy. It's still a kid. But if they're a gangster, the kid already has felonies and stuff. You could infer, even though it wouldn't be fair because people could change their life, but you can infer this kid might continue doing bad things. But they're killing babies. For all we know, there were astronauts and doctors and scientists and Nobel Peace Prize winners and playwrights that if they would have had the opportunity to leave, could have changed mankind. They're killing babies. We don't have a clue what those kids would have did. And that's the reality of these streets. And when you say, oh, well, what about white on white crime? You are being disingenuous because they don't have a problem. They don't have a problem with murder. I think it was like, I don't even want to quote it, but I think it was like 6,000 or something like that. I don't want to quote it, but whatever the number is, and I'll get the number for you guys on another live. It's over 200 million white people, and only like less than 10,000 of them are dying. It's much lower than that, but less of them are dying than black people, and there's only 40 million black people. It's terrible. Let's say it's 10,000, which is not. I think it's around 6,000. But let's say it's 10,000, right? What is 10,000 to 200 and something million people? More people die from car accidents a year because of that. More people die from the flu from that. Now, if I tell you 10,000 and it's 40 million people, that's much more significant. That's much more significant. But anyway, we could go on and on and on and talk about this. Thank you so much for watching today, guys. Thank you for hanging out with me for 2.5 hours. Probably not the longest live. I think the longest live I did was like 5 hours. It's crazy. But thank you so much for hanging with me and being patient. Black Sheepdog, my moderator for both the Discord and the live show, has been holding it down. I see you, Black Sheepdog. He's throwing links for the Discord. He's throwing out love and support for V Radio, moderating some of the nonsense. I accidentally blocked my man Regular Degler, but with haste, I unblocked him because I'm trying to block these crazy people. But Black Sheepdog already beat me to it, so he definitely blocked it. He's been holding it down, and I appreciate you, Black Sheepdog. Thank you once again for all the super chats. Please remember, we do have a PayPal, we do have a Patreon, we do have a mailing address, P.O. Box 114, Garnerville, New York. You can definitely mail me stuff. People have mailed me cards. People have mailed me soaps. People have mailed me money. People have mailed me all types of things in the P.O. box. It is active. It is paid for, and I do check it. So please consider sending me some mail to the Strategic Eye Show. You can find it on my main page. You can repay it. I just told you the address. Or you can go on most descriptions of most shows. I know I mess up sometimes and I don't put it. But if you keep searching, you'll find a show that has all of the contact information inside of the description box. Mail me something, and definitely, if you can, support me because I need it and because I want to be here and want to continue to do what I believe is good work. What I believe is good work. Black Sheeto says, shout out the chat. All right, man, I'll shout out the goddamn chat. And then I'm out of here, right? I've been saying I want to get out of here for 1,000 years. I'm still here. All right, my goal is 2:30. So 2 hours and 30 minutes, and it's 2 hours and 27 minutes. So I have 3 minutes to shout out the chat. Let's do it. Let's go to the top, man. Chris Drive was the first in the building. Appreciate you, Chris Drive, for coming through. Emily Rita's in the building. Thank you for supporting the channel. David S. sent us a lot of super chats today. We definitely appreciate it. So thank you, David S., for the love and support that you give the channel. A-Lady was in the building. She pissed me off, man. We had a nice little spirited debate, but I love A-Lady. She's been a longtime supporter of the channel, and I definitely appreciate her. John Jackson's in the building. John Jackson, I think that the avatar looks similar, so I think John Jackson changed his name from something else, but I'm pretty sure John Jackson has been with us for a while. He just changed his name. Dark Sage is in the building. 9117. Dark Sage 9117 is in the building. Said, I actually have an interesting take on the midterms. This is more of a local level thing, but it is something to keep an eye on. I agree, Dark Sage. I'm sorry I didn't acknowledge your comment. I'd love to know what your take is, but I do think that this midterms is basically being a reflection of how people feel locally, and you can gauge what's going to happen nationally based on how these local elections turn out. Let's keep going. Lionel Nola's in the building. What's happening? Thanks for coming through, supporting me. Of course, we got Black Sheepdog. We shouted him out. My guest was V Radio, and he also participated in the chat as well. He was arguing with A-Lady as well. She was pissing everybody off today. Let's keep going. Regular Decker was in the building. My man Regular Decker was in the building showing love, and then we had the porn advertisers pop into the chat, try and spam the chat, and I accidentally blocked them. But I did fix that. So Regular Degler is good money. He's back in business, and We're happy to have him. Let's keep going. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And so many people like to watch the show, but they don't like to comment. So, it is what it is. But I love the people who are definitely commenting, and because that's what actually sends us into the algorithm when you leave a comment and you react to things. Mark Becker's in the building. I haven't seen you in a while, Mark Becker, but it's always a pleasure to see you, my brother. Thanks for coming through, supporting the channel. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. XOXO Bob in the building. XOXO was over there putting the battery in A Lady's back. He just wanted to see some messy stuff, man. He wanted trouble today. XOXO Bob, big friend of the show, been with the show for a long time, and we appreciate you, XOXO Bob. Thanks for your continued support of the channel. I love my oldies and my goldies, man. The people have been there for a long time. It's heartening, man, because YouTube is just such a big beast, man. The whole world is on YouTube, so it's easy to get sucked away and to view other creators and forget about other creators. And even if you have all your notifications set to all, there's a good chance that YouTube will not notify you when a new video is dropped. So sometimes you can forget about a creator that you are fond of and you want to support. So for the people who constantly find their way back to the show, I have the utmost of respect for you, and I appreciate you immensely. Let's keep going. See if we have anybody else here. I think I covered everybody. I'm yawning. We're almost down to the bottom. So that means it's almost time to sign off. So, yeah, like I said, a lot of people watch the show, but most people don't like to interact with the chat. And it's not that they maybe don't want to talk. Some people, they're cleaning, they're working, they got their earbuds in, and just listening to the show. And that's okay too, man. So, but always remember, if you can, pop in and say hi. Let me know, because there's been times I've seen new people come in the chat and I'll be like, hey, thanks for coming to the show. You're new here. And they're like, dude, I've been listening to you since day one. I remember your first video. And I'm like, well, this is your first time commenting. And to me, it's like, I want people to know that you're an oldie and a goldie. And I know it doesn't matter to some people, but for the guy who's up at midnight, who's been streaming since 9:30 and it's midnight, and I'm tired and my eyes are feeling dry and I'm yawning and I want to go to bed and I'm about to leave you in a second, it means a lot to me because I put a lot of effort into doing these shows, and your support, the fact that you riding with me, man, it means the world to me. And Black Sheepdog with the last comment, we got Black Sheep, mad love for Black Sheepdog. He helps out with the show awfully a lot. He says, one last thing, say it with me, and we're not going to say it. But if you're watching the show, go to the live section and you'll be able to see what he wanted me to say. Negative, Black Sheepdog. It's not happening. Anyway, man, you guys have a wonderful night. Thanks for supporting the channel. Strategic is out of here. Peace.